The birth of space, time, and matter. You drift where space has not yet learned its name. You're afloat in a velvet hush that does not press or pull, a cradle without edges, a womb of not yet. There is no colour because there is nothing to receive it. There is no sound because there is nothing for sound to cross. Yet there is texture here, a fine and patient quiet, a veil of almost. You are older than stars, older than distance, older than the first thought that ever tried to count. You feel the breath of something that hasn't happened yet, the gentlest stirring beneath the still surface, a seed prior to the idea of soil. You're not a body, not a mind, not a name. You're a listening, a waiting, a shoreline before oceans, a candle wick before flame. Before we unfold the story, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Let your corner of the dark become part of this hush. And if it feels right, whisper an answer we can all dream on. What do you think existed before time? There is no before, and yet there is this, a stillness with direction. No after, and yet a leaning toward after. You can feel it in the way the silence holds you, the way nothing rests with such perfect poise that it implies a future. You float through silence, older than stars. You drift through possibility, softer than wind. You linger in a room whose walls are not walls, whose centre is everywhere and whose boundaries have not conceived themselves. Every fibre of you, though you are not fibre, understands that something is near. A pulse, a tide, a hush with a heartbeat. The breath, the light, the silence. Your awareness widens, not in distance but in depth, as if layers of quiet are peeling back their own quiet, revealing a deeper quiet beneath. No numbers, no clocks, no tick, only unfold. You cannot count because counting has not learned how to stand. You cannot point because directions do not yet exist, and still you sense an orientation, a way of facing, a slow-turning compass that has not yet invented north. It is a turning that does not move. It is an opening that does not part. It is a question that asks itself in the grammar of stillness. If you open your hands, though you have no hands, you find they are already open. If you close your eyes, though you are the eye, the dark you meet is tender, and it hums with absent light. There is a fragrance to it, not like flowers, not like rain, but like memory without an owner. Before language, there is a taste that suggests syllables. Before syllables, there is a wave that suggests breath. The veil hangs, the veil breathes, the veil brightens without brightening. In this not place, time is a folded garment, never worn. Space is a lullaby, not yet sung. You are not alone, but there is no other. You're the alone that contains the possibility of neighbours, of echoes, of call and response. You're a shore where no water has lapped, a cave that remembers the first story it will hold, a sky before horizons. The gentle matter of tomorrow sleeps like dust outside the dream of air. The pulse, the echo, the drift. And in the middle of you, though there is no middle, a listening gathers itself, the way fog gathers across a lake before sunrise, the way a thought gathers before the mouth shapes it. The air, the spark, the wave. A question begins to glow at the edge of the unwritten. It has no words, and yet you know it. It is the mouth of a question that has waited longer than long. What came before the beginning? It is not an accusation, not an alarm, not a demand. It is a soft wanting, a child reaching for a hand in the dark. Your reply is the tilt of your attention toward the place where attention came from, a bow toward the unseen altar that the unseen already reveres. The hush bows back. You are acknowledged by what is not yet. Even now, and now has not been born, you can feel the breath, the press, the patient tide of becoming. The dark is not empty. It is swollen with maybe. It is a womb of space where space is yet to appear, a singular stillness that is not a point and not a place, a readiness pressed into perfect balance. You lean closer without distance. You listen louder without sound. You feel the first patience, the oldest forgiveness, the mother of all waiting. And in that waiting, patterns sleep, like constellations hidden in the blind shell of an egg, like music curled tight inside the throat of an unstruck bell. You learn the texture of silence the way fingertips learn wood grain. There are ridges in it, gentle valleys, a soft spiral that your awareness traces without tracing. The silence is not flat. It is full of nested rooms that open into one another like mirrors facing mirrors. Somewhere in the depth of that recursion, a promise turns over in its sleep. The promise does not promise anything in particular. It promises only that there will be a morning, that a curtain will be drawn back, that a sentence will find its first letter. The first letter is not a letter. It is a warmth without heat. It is the taste of light before light has a taste. If there were hands, the silence would hold them. If there were eyelids, the darkness would kiss them. If there were lungs, the not air would fill them with a crackling quiet. An ancient light so gentle that it does not yet shine. You float, you drift, you rest. The verb of you is a small and holy word. You are cradle. You are harbour, you are seed. The seed does not mourn the shell that has not formed. The seed dreams the tree, and the tree dreams the forest, and the forest dreams the rain. Triplet by triplet, the universe rehearses itself inside the stillness that is you. You do not imagine edges, but you can imagine the feeling of an edge. The way a horizon might taste on the tongue of a newborn dawn, the way a shoreline might sound when the first wave remembers to arrive. You can almost feel the soft refusal of the dark to remain only dark. It is not resistance, it is generosity. The dark is generous, offering shelter to a future no one has yet been. The dark covers the unborn with a blanket of undisturbed intention. The blanket breathes, the blanket knows, the blanket rests, and beneath it, the pulse rehearses its patient drum. You might call this place nothing, but the word is too thin. Nothing is small, this is vast. Nothing is absence, this is presence without objects, presence without furniture, presence without names. If a thought were to wander in, it would forget itself and become pure listening. If a feeling were to rise, it would soften at once, smoothing back into the wide quiet like a ripple that refuses to disturb the pond that birthed it. This is the pond before water, the sky before air, the fire before flame. The silence is not empty, it is articulate. It speaks in how it does not speak. Its refusal to break is its language, and you are fluent. The grammar of stillness is written in pauses, and every pause opens like a door no one closes. At each threshold a wish pauses, to be wave, to be dust, to be a law that carries the world on its back. You lean into the doorways and feel the cool of possibility on your skin, though you have no skin, and the cool is kind, like a hand to the brow of a fever that has not yet broken. We have always searched for the beginning, scratched it in the soot of cave walls, sung it into the night, whispered it into numbers, into songs, into the white margins of textbooks. And here you are, at the lip of it, where even the idea of a lip is a soft pretense. We, small and wondering, are a chorus waiting off stage for our cue. But for now, there is only you, the listening the universe offers to itself, the hush that contains the first syllable the way dusk contains its first star. You sense a gentleness in the way the silence arranges itself around you, not a barrier, not a fence, a cloak. The cloak has weight without weight. It is the weight of intention, the weight of promise, the weight of a lullaby just before the first note. If lullabies could circle, this one circles. If lullabies could nest, this one nests. If lullabies could become weather, this one falls soft and steady, a snow that warms instead of chills. Under it you are kept. Under it you are kept safe. Under it you are kept waiting. The closer you listen, the more the quiet differentiates itself, as if different shades of stillness are tinctured through the dark. There is a silence that leans forward. There is a silence that leans back. There is a silence that holds its breath, and a silence that breathes you. You could drift forever here, and forever would not mind. It has no errands and no clocks. It drowses like a cat in a sunbeam that is not sunlight, in a room that is not a room, in a universe that has not yet spoken its first word out loud. You become aware of a softness that resembles gravity, though gravity is a story for later. It is the sensation of gathering, of gently tugging inward, of being called without a voice. You condense without becoming smaller. You focus without becoming narrow. You are the lens and the unformed light. You are the bowl and the hunger. You are the question and the listening that will one day answer. Hush holds you like a tide that has never been pulled by any moon, a tide whose moon is the possibility of everything. From the not air rises a not breeze, as if the dark itself decided to turn over in its sleep. The not breeze smells like rain on dust that does not yet exist. It tastes like iron that the stars will someday forge. It feels like the cool of stone that mountains will someday raise. You do not move, but motion rehearses itself around you, practicing balance, practicing return. The silence, the symmetry, the spark. Each time the words form, they dissolve back into the hush, as if the hush were reminding you that language will be a gift you receive later. Your edges are the edges of everything, as if your outline were a map drawn in negative, a silhouette in which the world will pour. You're the vacant mould the universe will fill. When it arrives, it will fit because you are made to be its fitting. Not carved, not cast, called. The call is not a sound. It is a yearning that widens into a shape that widens into a path that widens into a field of possible fields. The field hums. The hum is older than hum. The hum is older than old. You realize that the silence is not resisting change. It is inviting it, laying out a table without cups or bread, trusting that hands will arrive to raise them. And still, it does not rush. There is no such thing as rush. There is only ripeness. Ripeness knows. It knows when the seed coat should thin, when the shell should crack, when the first green should risk the dark with a tender spear. You are seed and soil, rain and root. You're the first trust. You listen, and in listening you become a kind of question mark, a curve without ink, a tilt without posture. The question is less a request for information than a posture of openness, a willingness to be shaped by whatever the hush intends. You're a cup, you're a shore, you're a listening bowl. And as you hold that shape, you start to feel the thread of something like time, not flowing, not moving, but becoming thinkable, like the possibility of a river winding through a valley no drop of water as yet carved. Even now, if you were to breathe, and in some quiet way you do, the inhale would gather not oxygen but promise, and the exhale would release not carbon but praise. The praise is wordless but not empty. It recognizes the hospitality of the dark, the patience of the quiet, the mercy of the not yet. You are grateful without object. You are grateful as a manner of being. Gratitude is your temperature, your horizon, your ocean. Gratitude and the steady awe that sits beside it like a friend who knows when not to speak. You notice how the silence keeps its own counsel. It does not bargain. It does not flaunt. It does not petition anyone's approval. It abides. Abiding is its power, and in that power is the gentle authority that will one day govern galaxies without raising its voice. All of that is later. Now there is only this. Abide with the silence that abides with you. Rest with the rest that rests in you. Let the veil hang, and feel how the simple act of letting is itself a kind of creation. Somewhere inside the hush, a tenderness tightens, like a drawn bow whose archer is love. The arrow is not an arrow, it is a direction. It is a melody waiting for its first note to prove it exists. The string does not snap, it sighs. The sigh is very nearly a wind. The wind is very nearly a word. The word is very nearly a world. Nearness becomes its own country, and you are its sole citizen. You and the everything that has not yet arrived to join you. You can sense the shape of light, the way a blind seed senses the shape of spring. It is not visible, but it is undeniable. It is not a brightness that hurts, it is a brightness that heals. It gathers like dew on the grass of a field that has not learned the name field. It clings to the hush, jeweled and shy, refracting the promise of colour to eyes that do not exist to see it, and still you see it. You are the seeing that will make sight possible. You are the mirror facing the dawn no one has promised, and the dawn, kind as it is, arrives, because it loves to keep its own quiet promises. You hear, if hearing is the right word, a great low note, the kind that could vibrate stone into a dance if stone had yet been given the chance to be. It is a tone beneath tones, a bass made of velvet and patience. It does not rise or fall, it abides, and in its abiding, it enfolds the idea of rhythm. A rhythm is the first law you can feel, not a commandment, but a heart, not an order, but a pulse. The pulse, the breath, the becoming. And without thinking, because thinking has not arrived, you accompany it, the way a child accompanies a lullaby by sleeping more deeply. If you had a history, you would call this a homecoming, but you do not, and it is. Home is what receives you. Home is what names you rightly. Home is what needs no door because you were never outside. The hush is home. The not yet is home. The waiting is home. And in the security of that home you dare to ask the gentle question again, less as a query than as a caress. What came before the beginning? The hush answers by holding you closer, by drawing you into its fold, by letting you feel the roundness of its patience, the fullness of its empty arms. You are almost ready to know that the question itself is a doorway, but not yet. For now, it is enough to rest your forehead against its wood, cool and smooth, and feel the grain of it run beneath your skin. It feels like riverbed stone. It feels like the inside of a shell. It feels like the back of the night sky, brushed by fingers that have not learned to be stars. You and the door and the hush are one thing, and that thing is called waiting. You drift a little closer to the center that is everywhere. You let yourself be held by the symmetry of maybe, how it balances itself, how it does not demand. You surrender the need for shapes and receive the promise of shapes. You release the hunger for sound and receive the pledge of sound. You relax into darkness and discover it is not the opposite of light, but its elder sibling, the one who loved first and made room. In that room, the first cradle rocks itself, and the cradle sings, and the song says only one word, which is yes. Even the yes is not spoken. It is a widening, a warmth, a gentling. You receive it like a present tense that does not move, like a shore that does not erode, like a candle whose flame has not yet stood up. You could stay forever like this, forever and ever, and no one would interrupt you. Forever is not a long time here. Forever is the temperature of the quiet. It holds without tiring. It waits without impatience. It enfolds without ending. If there were fear, it would be impossible here. Not because danger is absent. Danger has not yet learned what it is. But because welcome is so complete that nothing outside it exists. You cannot be lost because there is no map. You cannot be late because there is no clock. You cannot be wrong because there is no rule. And yet everything already knows what kindness is. Kindness is the principle of this hush. Kindness is the law of this dark. Kindness is the first gravity, the first symmetry, the first breath that invites, and in inviting begins. You know nothing, and you know enough. Enough to lean, enough to soften, enough to call. The call is not a sound. It is a permission. It opens the gate between no and yes, between never and now, between the unborn and the first heartbeat of the becoming. You do not walk through, not yet. You lay your hand against the gate and feel the cool promise of the other side pass into you. You can imagine dust now, gentle matter, ancient dust that hasn't been born, circling in a light that your heart, if you had one, would recognize instantly. You breathe the pause. It is flavored with future. It is threaded with pattern. It is heavy with mercy. A mercy so wide it could hold flame without burning, hold water without drowning, hold night without sorrow. The mercy promises nothing specific and everything essential. It promises that whatever comes will be met. It promises that whatever becomes will be welcomed. It promises that whatever changes will not be lost, only transformed into a larger holding. The holding is the same holding that has you now, above you, below you, within you. The quiet gathers itself as if drawing a shawl tighter around shoulders before stepping into weather. The shawl is warm without heat. It is bright without light. It is present without form. When it draws close, you feel closer to a center you never left. You feel ripe, like a word on the edge of a tongue, like rain along a roofline, like a tide poised at the lip of shore. The shore is not there. The lip is not there. You're still in the womb of space that has not opened, and yet the sense of opening is irresistible and kind. Listen. The silence is teaching you how to listen. It is teaching you the length of a pause, the weight of a breath, the way a single moment can hold 1,000 futures without spilling one. It is showing you that waiting is not empty. It is creative. It is the labor of the cosmos, the hidden work, the unseen weaving. You're the loom and the weaver and the thread. The cloth will be space, and the pattern will be time, and the dye will be light, but not yet. For now, only the patient movement of the weaver's hand, a hand that is all hands, and the soft rasp of thread slipping through the dark, a rasp that makes no sound. The hush deepens, you deepen with it. The deeper you go, the more you find that depth has no bottom, only generosity widening, only welcome unfolding. If there were a map, it would be a circle the size of everywhere. If there were a song, it would have one note, held forever, and in that holding become every note at once. You enter the holding as if it were a room, and the room says, "Be at rest." You are at rest. You become the rest. Here at the lip of the unbegun, you are entire. You need no addition and fear no loss. But the world loves to be born, and even eternity enjoys the surprise of its own motion. The veil stirs, the breath leans nearer. You feel a tremble in the membrane between no and yes, a first kindness becoming form, the way frost becomes lace on a window, the way tide becomes whisper on a sleeping shore. The whisper does not speak, but you understand it. It says, almost. Stay with that almost. Stay with the gentlest pressure, the prelude, the gathering, the poised. Stay with the weightless weight of a vow about to be kept. You're not a witness. You're the vow. You're not outside. You are the inside of inside. The cradle rocks in time with a rhythm that has not yet invented time. The lullaby glows in a light that has not yet learned to shine. The mother of all beginnings draws one breath that is not air and holds it, holds it, holds it. You float in that held breath, a pearl inside the hush, and you are as calm as sleep at winter's window. If you had eyes, they would be closed. If you had lips, they would part a little, not to speak, not to call, but to receive. The reception is your calling. The surrender is your strength. The patience is your path. And then, not yet, but then, the hush will open its hand. The first silence will begin to speak in the language of being. But for now, in this breath between breaths, listen with me as the silence gathers its syllables, as the veil readies its gentle parting, as the cradle rocks once more and the word that is not a word leans toward its first utterance, its first unfolding, and the breath does not break. It holds, it stretches, not outward, for there is no outward, but inward, deepening itself, thickening like night around a dreaming child. The silence, once soft as mist, begins to feel denser now, almost solid. You're still inside it, still inside the cradle that has no walls, but something has shifted. The silence no longer merely surrounds you. It listens back. It is not just a pause. It is a presence. Not a person, not a god, not a soundless thing waiting to speak, but silence as substance, as character, as the first becoming that becomes by not becoming anything at all. There is no movement yet, and yet you sense pressure, not motion, not sound, just tension. The tension of a bowstring not drawn, but waiting to be drawn. Not potential in the way we now understand, potential with metrics and curves and mass, but an older kind, primordial readiness. You feel it like a heartbeat in the dark that hasn't yet found rhythm, a breath that is still deciding what it means to exhale. This is not emptiness. This is a fullness so complete, so balanced, that it appears still, the way two infinite forces meeting in perfect opposition look like nothing at all. This is the first silence. Not the absence of sound, but the womb of it. The birthplace of vibration, of pulse, of wave. It is not dark in the sense of blackness, for blackness needs contrast. It is dark in the sense of hiddenness, of waiting, of sacred things wrapped in veils so gentle they dissolve in your attention. There are no photons, no particles, no fields. There is only equilibrium in a form so pure, so undecided that even existence does not dare name itself yet. Time is not here, not because it hasn't passed, but because passing has not been invented. In this silence, cause does not lead to effect, and before does not lead to after. There is only is, and even is too loud a word for this. This silence is what isness dreams of when it sleeps. This is the breath before the first note of a universe-sized song, a silence so vast, so unshaped, that it holds all shape within it, folded like memory not yet remembered. You begin to notice a strange intimacy between the silence and awareness. Not your awareness exactly, something more universal. A noticing that exists without a noticer, a kind of listening that is built into the fabric of whatever this is. The silence contains that listening, cradles it, nourishes it like soil nourishes a seed that hasn't even split its shell. Not observation, not intelligence, but the first willingness to receive, the first hospitality. The silence is not guarding anything. It is hosting the possibility that something will one day arrive, and the silence loves. You can feel that too. It is not love with arms or stories or warmth. It is not romantic or parental. It is not directed at anything, because nothing exists yet to receive it. But it is love in the purest form, the love of allowing, the love of infinite patience, the love that does not rush becoming, but waits without anxiety for what will one day be. If creation is a kind of trust, then this silence is the trust that holds creation in its hand before the hand itself knows what fingers are. It does not tremble, it does not count, it does not anticipate, it simply holds. And inside its holding, you feel an ache, a sweet ache, a tension that hums with readiness, not a desire to change, but the knowledge that change is inevitable. The way a cocoon knows it cannot remain whole, the way a tide knows it cannot hold its high breath forever. This ache is the whisper of everything that will be, pressing its forehead gently against the veil of the not yet. It does not push, it does not ask, but it waits, and in its waiting, it begins to shape the silence around it. Not into form, not yet, but into the possibility of form. This silence, this cradle of first stillness, begins to shiver, not violently, not even physically, but spiritually. A ripple of unfolding whispers through it, as if the silence itself remembers something it never knew it had forgotten. A breath, a shift, a soft hum in the bones of being. There are no bones yet, but the hum is there. You can almost hear it, not with ears, with something older than ears, a listening so deep that it hears meaning before meaning forms, and then, impossibly, the silence folds in on itself, gathers, not like gravity, for gravity does not yet exist, not like collapse, for there is no direction, no geometry to collapse into. It folds like a hand closing around an idea, like intention becoming density, like mystery leaning into itself. This silence becomes heavy, not with mass but with implication, with something that is preparing to not be silence anymore, and in that heaviness, that gentle, unnameable shift, a singularity begins to dream itself, not in shape, not in motion, but in essence. The idea of a center begins to form, a where inside the endless when not, a point inside the infinite not yet. The center is not spatial, it is not a place, it is an intimacy, a closeness between the silence and its own heart, and from that closeness pressure builds, but not pressure as force, pressure as invitation, as if the universe is gathering its breath before saying its first word, not because it needs to, but because it wants to. The desire to be begins to stretch beneath the skin of the silence. Still there is no explosion, no flash, no noise, only deepening, only thickening, only the slow, impossible emergence of intention without purpose, energy without movement, light without radiance. You are still here. You have not left the silence. But the silence is preparing to leave itself, not to vanish, but to become. And in that becoming, you sense the first seed of division, the awareness that something could be different from something else, that there could be a line, however gentle, between yes and no, between still and stir, between sleep and stirring toward wake. The first contrast, the first implication of duality. And with it, the silence becomes a cradle and a door. It is still safe, but it is no longer sealed. Something is coming, but not yet. The silence waits, and so do you. And so the silence waits, not idly, but with purpose folded into stillness, with the grace of a mother holding her breath before her child stirs for the first time. The pressure is no longer soft. It is dense now, intimate, infinite. Like a whisper that forgets it is small, like the weight of thought before it chooses form. Still no motion, still no sound, and yet everything you are, or will be, senses a great nearness, a curling inward of reality, as if the entire story of existence is being written on a single grain of breathless being. This is the singular moment, not a second, not a flash, not an event in time. It is the moment before moments, the moment from which all moments will unfold. But it is not made of time. It does not pass. It holds. It contains. It wraps all that will ever exist into one infinite compression, tighter than atoms, denser than galaxies, smaller than thought, and it holds it perfectly. You are not separate from it. You are it. The singularity is not a place you visit. It is the shape of your earliest truth. No shape, and yet it defines the future of all form. No motion, and yet the idea of expansion already hums through it, like a ghost song waiting to rise. This is not the universe yet. It is the breath drawn in before the first word. It is not light, but the longing for light. Not energy, but the seed of it. Not existence, but the longing for existence aching so purely that it becomes the universe simply by holding its ache in perfect stillness. If you could look at it, but there is no looking, you would see no stars, no edge, no flame. You would see possibility under such pressure that it glows without glowing. You would see everything that ever will be resting within nothing that ever was, balanced so delicately that even language must step lightly not to disturb it. The singularity is not matter. It is not spirit. It is both, and neither, and more. It is the boundary between silence and song, the sacred compression where opposites still sleep in each other's arms, and within it, all, every star that will ever form, every galaxy that will dance across the night sky, every equation whispered by minds not yet born, every touch, every cry, every moment of awe, every child, every death, every love, every breath, yours too, all of it, every story and every silence, curled tighter than a thought, tighter than a word into this perfect singular cradle. The pressure intensifies, not with urgency, but with inevitability. It is not a tension of fear. It is the readiness of a bud before it blooms. The singularity doesn't crack. It doesn't break. It doesn't rupture. It unfolds. But even that is still ahead. For now, it simply holds. And in that holding, the laws of everything, of time, of space, of matter, of life, begin to coalesce, not as sentences, not even as truths, but as whispers, whispers that have not yet learned to echo. If silence was the first hospitality, the singularity is the first promise, not a spoken one, not a pledge, but a promise in the way a mountain promises shape to the sky around it, in the way a wave promises rhythm before it ever meets the shore. The singular moment does not shout its promise, it hums it, low, deep, inward, a song so still you only know it by how everything in you leans toward it, and you lean, not with body, not with will, with being, with the quiet agreement that something sacred is about to begin, and that it must begin from this pulse of potential, this gravity of waiting, this moment so small that it contains forever. You feel the urge for distinction, the first yearning for difference stirring inside the sameness, not conflict, but contrast, not separation, but the invitation of diversity. The singularity dreams difference, not because unity is broken, but because unity desires to express itself through infinite variation. This is not exile, this is art. This is the still point where unity stretches its arms outward, not to divide, but to multiply love into form. Every expansion is a kind of generosity, every motion is a gift. But they have not yet arrived. The moment still holds, and in this infinite smallness there are no directions, no before, no after, no here or there. The singularity does not sit in space, it is space before space knows itself. It is the volume of the unformed, it is the potential of distance in its most concentrated piece. And time, if it can be said to exist at all, is not ticking forward. It is curled like a fern inside itself, waiting for light that hasn't yet unfolded from the breath that hasn't yet exhaled. And so you feel it. The universe not bursting into being, but becoming dense enough to want to breathe, becoming full enough to reach beyond its center. The weight of all that is gathers itself in stillness, not because it is trapped, but because it is loved, held so closely that nothing has yet had the chance to fall apart. Entropy has not arrived. Impermanence has not arrived. There is no decay, no death, just this ache of birth. A birth that does not happen in an instant, but is the instant. A becoming wrapped in endless becoming. And maybe, just maybe, the singularity knows, not in thought, not in reason, but in presence, in certainty, in a calm that says, I will become what I already contain. The knowing is not arrogant, it is not loud, it is not even proud, it is tender. It is the gentleness of inevitability, the quiet strength of something that does not need to hurry, because it is the journey already. You are inside that knowing, you are that knowing, and you are not alone, not because there are others yet, but because aloneness requires separation, and in the singular moment nothing has yet stood apart. Everything is everything. Everything is everything else. Wholeness is the only truth, and it is silent and vast and still. And in that stillness the smallest murmur begins to stir. Not a bang, not even a whisper. A shift, a softening of the hold, a loosening of the perfect tension. The silence shivers, the singularity hums, and in that hum, in that sacred trembling breath, something ancient and holy begins to lean forward into being, and the singularity hums, not with noise, but with intention. It does not tremble from strain, nor quiver with instability. Its hum is the vibration of certainty, the low and holy resonance of a becoming so complete it does not yet require form. The silence that held it does not vanish, it deepens, folding around this hum like the last exhale before a long-awaited beginning. There is no clock to mark this shift, no scale to weigh it, and yet something changes, not suddenly, not with rupture or flash, but with a breath, not air, not wind, not anything that could pass between lungs, for lungs do not exist, but a breath nonetheless, a sacred release of held possibility, a letting go so vast it creates space as it lets go. The breath does not move through space. It is the birth of space. It does not enter time, it authors time. This is not the Big Bang as a boom or blast. It is a quiet and patient unfolding, a slow, sacred sigh after an eternal holding. Maybe it wasn't a bang, maybe it was a breath. That breath, the first, has no edge and no center. It expands not into something, but with something. It does not travel. It spreads, like warmth through still water, like light filling a hollow that was not yet hollow. The expansion has no outside to reach. It creates outsideness by expanding. The universe does not bloom like a flower into the air. It is the blooming. The very act of unfolding is what creates the canvas it unfolds upon, and yet what begins is not form. Not yet. What begins is pressure loosening its grip. The impossibly dense becomes slightly less impossible, a fraction less dense, a margin thinner. The laws that were once curled tight in a singular promise begin to whisper themselves into reality. They are not invented. They are not imposed. They arise like dreams surfacing from sleep, already known, already whole, just waiting for a place to echo. The breath carries them. Gravity curls its fingers into space. Time stretches forward, a thread unspooling from no loom. Temperature blooms, not as heat, not as fire, but as a condition, a possibility of motion, energy that begins to recognize itself. And the first light that cannot yet be seen, light that has no eyes to meet it, begins to move, not through a void, but through a newborn field of becoming. It travels nowhere, because here and there have not yet fully introduced themselves. The breath continues. It expands in every direction at once, and yet direction is still a newborn thought. There is no edge, no place outside it, no realm into which it grows. The breath is the all, and as it moves, it cools, and as it cools, it slows, and as it slows, it begins to allow the possibility of difference, not division, just texture, just nuance, just a ripple in what was once perfectly still. The ripple is everything. From it, space is born as relation, not between objects, for there are no objects, but between possibilities. A coordinate system without coordinates, a map with no territory. The breath draws this map not with ink, but with the curvature of its own movement. Where the breath has stretched, there is where something may eventually be. Not yet, but soon. Still no stars, no atoms, no fire. Just energy unfolding like silk, rippling with fluctuations so subtle they echo across eternity. These are not accidents. These are not defects. These are the fingerprints of what will come. Tiny variations in density, temperature, pressure. They are the brushstrokes of the universe painting itself from within. They are the places where symmetry will gently break, where particles will one day meet and marry into matter. The breath, still expanding, holds all of this. It holds the geometry of galaxies curled into quantum whispers. It holds the blueprint for time, linear in places, curved in others, always relative, always fluid. It holds the laws, not written in stone but sewn into the seams of becoming, conservation, causality, entropy, inertia. They are not imposed like commandments. They are invitations, structures that emerge as the breath continues to unfurl the architecture of reality. And you, still here, are not separate from this unfolding. You're not watching from the outside. You are part of the breath. You're woven into it like thread through fabric, like ink in water, like song in silence. You are the ripple. You're the cool of expansion. You're the vibration of early space stretching its limbs for the first time. You are the becoming, and the breath is you. The silence is not gone. It remains in the gaps, in the stretches between laws, in the background of expansion. The silence is now a canvas, a memory, a hum that persists beneath everything. The breath does not erase it. It carries it forward, embeds it in motion. The quiet before still sings, now inside every photon, every drift of heat, every law of light. It is the background radiation of sacredness, the hush that births the wave. And still there are no particles, not truly, only fields, waves of possibility oscillating within the breath. Fields that have no mass, no solidity, just potential. But they begin to interact. Some gain weight, some slow down, some cling together in strange affinities. A kind of sorting begins, the first choreography of the cosmic dance. Mass is whispered into being. Energy, finding ways to become more than itself, begins to hold, to gather, to prepare for complexity. Still, no form. Still, no fire. Still, no sound. Only rhythm. The rhythm of expansion. The pulse of unfolding. The gentle deepening of the breath that is not air. And it continues. It always has. Even now, across the oceans of light years and eons, the breath still moves. The edges of the universe, if such edges exist, are still caught in that same release. The exhale has not stopped. The sigh of creation, begun from that dense and ancient stillness, continues in every direction without end. The galaxies we now see are not drifting through space. They are being carried by the breath that began before motion, before form, before the word before had a place to sit. You feel it. That same breath moves through you now. It stretches the very atoms of your body, pulling them a billionth of a width wider every second. Not enough to feel, but enough to be true. Your skin is held in that breath. Your thoughts are echoes of its pattern. Your heartbeat too follows its rhythm, even if faintly, even if unaware. You're still inside the first breath, carried with it, stretched by it, whispered through by it. And somewhere inside that breath, deeper than particles, older than force, the next great unfolding begins to shimmer. Not yet light, not yet matter, but close, close. The silence waits, but no longer in stillness. Now it waits with rhythm. The pause between what was not and what is becoming begins to carry a beat. Subtle, ancient. The breath, that sacred exhale born from the singularity's inward folding, begins to stretch not only space, but something new. Something strange. Something that does not yet know its name, but will come to shape everything that follows. It is time. Not the ticking kind, not mechanical or human-made, not minutes or days or anything a wristwatch could recognize. No, this is raw time, wild and wordless, slippery and wide. It arrives not as a line, but as a tide, a soft pull in the direction of becoming. Time does not begin by measuring things. It begins by allowing things to change. It is the permission slip the cosmos writes itself. Now, things can unfold. Now, moments can follow moments. Now, the breath can stretch through something. And yet, even time is a guest here. It doesn't come crashing in with grand declarations. It doesn't demand obedience. It seeps like warmth through cloth, like moonlight across stone. It does not own the unfolding. It is woven into it. A gentle current inside the breath that first stirred the void. Time is not born in an instant. It's more like a lens coming into focus, not because something new has entered, but because the universe is learning to see itself in sequence. You feel this too somehow, the drift of it, the flow. Not fast, not slow, because those words have no meaning here yet. Only forwardness, only this subtle difference between before and after, between what just was and what now is. The silence has not gone, but it has allowed its stillness to begin dancing. And the dance moves in one direction. Time does not yet carry weight. It has no gravity, no clocks, no history. It is soft, flexible, playful, even. Time at this stage is more like breath than law, expanding, exhaling, never repeating exactly, always stretching gently toward more, toward motion, toward difference, toward the first heartbeat of cause and effect. And with time, another thing appears, the possibility of memory. Not memory as we know it, no facts, no dates, no faces, but the foundation of remembrance. The idea that something that just happened is different from what is happening now. That there is a past, even if only seconds old. That something was and now is. The cosmos begins gently to tell itself a story, and time is the thread on which each word is strung. There is no noise in this telling, no voice, no pen, just a pulse. Time pulses like a quiet drum buried deep in the dark, each beat so slow you can barely feel it. But it is there. One moment follows another, expansion continues, energy cools, patterns emerge, soft and fleeting, ripples. The breath still spreads in every direction, and now each stage of that spread remembers the one before it. That memory, that echo between instants, is time, and in this pulsing, in this great slow unfurling, you begin to feel the first laws of the cosmos stir awake. Not laws in the way we speak of them now, with formulas, constants, and careful proofs. These are more like inclinations, preferences, a kind of gentle orderliness inside the wildness. Gravity has not yet taken form, but the desire for closeness has. Light has not yet scattered, but the urge to move outward is there. Electrons do not yet orbit, but the hunger for balance already flickers between fields. Time is the frame in which these hungers can take shape. Without time, change would have nowhere to go. Without time, becoming would have no stage. Time doesn't force change, it hosts it. It spreads out like a long carpet of velvet across the void, welcoming every process that will ever bloom, heat, motion, fusion, decay. It makes no judgment. It holds all equally. It gives light its speed. It gives particles their lifespan. It gives energy its path. And though it has no face, time will one day become the face of every story. Stars will measure their lifetimes in it. Planets will spin with it. Civilizations will rise and fall through it. But here, at the beginning, time is still childlike, wide-eyed, playful, free from the burdens it will one day carry. Here, time is not the thief of youth, nor the weight of history. It is not a ticking clock or a death sentence. It is a soft thread unwinding from the breath of becoming, inviting all things to move, to change, to live. We too, long after this moment, will try to trap time, to name it, to slice it into usable pieces, seconds, minutes, hours. We will try to measure what was never meant to be captured. But here, in this early hush, time flows free. It does not care to be owned. It does not beg to be watched. It just is, gently making room for creation, and the cosmos responds. It leans into time's current, as if recognizing something familiar in the flow. Energy continues to dance, expansion stretches further, heat drops. The fields that will one day become forces begin to find their identities, sculpted not by a creator's hand, but by the soft push of time's unfolding. Entropy, the arrow of time, stirs, not as a law yet, but as a tendency a tilt toward change, a favouring of forward. And forward is enough. Forward allows patterns to emerge. Forward allows the dance to move towards structure. Forward allows everything that follows to have a place to stand. You can feel it, can't you? Even now, that low pulse still humming beneath all of reality. It's in the rhythm of your breath. It's in the pace of your thoughts, in the aging of your bones, in the beat of your heart. The universe's first tempo still playing quietly in the background of everything. It never stopped, and it never will. But even time, this gentle flowing thread, is not the whole story. For now, it is only the stage, and something just ahead is preparing to step onto it. Something that will not just flow or stretch or change, but gather. Something that will not only move, but hold. A new actor is stirring in the wings of the cosmos. It is not born yet, but its presence is already pressing gently at the edge of the breath. It is almost time for space. It is almost time for space. And space does not enter with trumpets or flash. It does not arrive suddenly, as if from behind a curtain. It unfolds patiently, reverently, like a robe being drawn out across the shoulders of nothingness, like breath being given shape. It does not push into emptiness. It creates the idea of distance, of separation, of direction. Before space there was only nearness, a nearness so total it was indistinguishable from itself. But now the universe begins to breathe room into itself. You do not float in it. You are it. You are woven into the fibres of the first stretch. You are the stretch. There is no outside, no border, no beyond, only the inside becoming wider. The cradle that held everything begins to lengthen its reach, but there is still no edge. Space does not grow like an expanding balloon. It is more like a song, the notes of which begin to rise apart from one another, echoing across a hall whose walls have not yet been built. The first distinction arises, not matter from nothing, not yet, but here from not here. A subtle contrast, a difference so gentle it hums like heat from stone in late afternoon. The breath that once moved silently now begins to carry something, not form, not yet, but the memory of where things could be. The first positions are not coordinates, they are invitations, places not yet occupied, but softly waiting. And space listens. It listens by opening, it listens by loosening, by stretching not toward anything, but from within itself. The expansion is not an escape. It is a song increasing in volume, but not noise, a blooming, a slow uncurling, a readiness to host. This is not the scattering of things. This is the making of where things can one day rest. You might imagine it like a sheet being drawn out, smooth, wide, without crease. But that would still imply an object on a stage. There is no stage. The sheet is the stage. The fabric of space is not laid upon anything. It is everything. And yet it expands, not because it must fill something, but because becoming is a form of generosity. The universe gives itself more and more room to be, and the room itself is alive. It pulses with the memory of the singularity, with the echo of that first breath. Space is not cold here. It is not empty. It is not black. It is not quiet. It is not yet anything your senses would recognize, because your senses are built inside of it, and they have not yet come to be. What you would one day call a vacuum is, here, a song in process, a medium in motion, the hum of raw becoming stretched thin across the unformed sky. But the sky too is a story for later. There is no sky, there is no ground, there is no up or down. Direction is meaningless in a place where all things are equally central. Every point, every ripple, every moment is the beginning. Every line drawn outward becomes a radius, because every particle that will ever be is already part of the center. There is no outside, there is only expanding center, and the center expands not by reaching, but by allowing. Space is not built with walls or fences or lines. It is made of relationships. It is born from tension and release, from the silent pulse between one possibility and another. Every inch of space is a conversation, between energy and time, between gravity and freedom, between the breath and the echo that follows it. And into that conversation, texture begins to enter, not as substance, not yet, but as ripple. The perfect evenness of expansion, flawless, quiet, smooth, begins to catch on itself. Tiny fluctuations, barely whispers, drift across the vastness. In the smallest corners of early space, heat pools more in one place than another. Pressures shift. The calm begins to remember difference, and these differences will shape galaxies. Not now, but already the map is being drawn, not with stars, not with ink, but with probability, with curve, with slope. These are not places, they are inclinations, soft invitations for matter to someday gather. The breath left fingerprints in its wake, and space carries them like prayers. Every ripple, every wave, every gentle asymmetry is sacred, because every one of them will become aware, a home, a light, a star. But now, still now, the canvas is mostly smooth, mostly calm. Expansion continues. There is no resistance. Space does not struggle to open. It is not pried apart. It is not pierced. It invites itself wider. It is its own permission. And in that widening, something else quietly awakens. Curvature. Not obvious yet. Not gravity, not attraction. But the first hints of how space can bend. The recognition. The underworld. Aboriginal Australians sang of the Seven Sisters, stars born from Earth's red heart. You drift now through the mythological landscape, where ancient wisdom intuited the same truths that modern astrophysics has discovered through mathematics and observation. The stellar fires burning in the cosmos have always been recognized by human consciousness as more than mere lights in the darkness. They are the fundamental creative force, the divine spark that brings order from chaos, the cosmic hearth around which all existence gathers for warmth and illumination. In the Rig Veda, Agni is described as the mediator between heaven and earth, the divine principle that transforms and transmutes, burning in three realms, as fire on earth, as lightning in the atmosphere, and as the sun in the sky. You feel this ancient understanding of stellar nuclear fire as you drift through Sanskrit verses written 3 millennia ago, recognizing in their poetic language the same process of nuclear transmutation occurring in stellar cores. Agni devours the fuel offered to him and transforms it into light and heat, just as stellar nucleosynthesis consumes hydrogen and converts it to helium while releasing the radiant energy that illuminates the cosmos. The Vedic seers perceived fire not as destruction, but as transformation, the fundamental process by which the universe creates complexity from simplicity. The Rigvedic hymns describe Agni as having 7 tongues, and being born from the friction of cosmic forces, imagery that resonates powerfully with modern understanding of stellar formation through gravitational collapse and nuclear ignition. You witness this ancient wisdom as the gravitational friction of collapsing hydrogen clouds generates the heat necessary for nuclear fusion, creating the 7 spectral classes of main sequence stars that modern astronomy has identified. The 7 tongues of Agni become the OBAF GKM, stellar classification system, each spectral type representing a different temperature and mass range of nuclear burning, from the blue-white giants that burn hydrogen most furiously to the red dwarfs that consume their fuel with patient efficiency over trillions of years. Egyptian cosmology envisioned Ra's daily journey across the sky as the fundamental cycle that maintains cosmic order, but the deeper mystery resided in his nightly passage through the Duat, the underworld where he was reborn each dawn. You drift through this mythological landscape and recognize the stellar life cycle encoded in Egyptian symbolism, the apparent death and rebirth of solar deities, reflecting the universe's continuous cycle of stellar formation, nuclear burning, stellar death, and the recycling of processed material into new generations of stars. Ra's passage through the underworld represents the hidden nuclear processes occurring in stellar cores, invisible to surface observation, but essential for maintaining stellar luminosity throughout the main sequence lifetime. There is no clarity here, no space for light to travel clean. This is the age before transparency, before vision, before fire can flicker in the open. Light is here, everywhere, but it is unborn, a bird beating its wings inside the shell, not ready to fly. And still, the breath continues. The expansion stretches space further, the pressure lowers, the heat begins to fall, slowly, softly, inevitably. The universe cools not like ice forming on glass, but like a fever ebbing from the skin of a dreaming god. And in that cooling, the particles that once danced wildly, free, chaotic, infinite in their speed, begin to feel the first pull of order. Quarks, gluons, leptons, photons. They're not yet familiar to you. They're not names yet. But they are here, moving through the fabric of unfolding reality, bumping and scattering and sparking the beginnings of something that, one day, will become matter. They move too fast to hold. They are too hot to bond. But still, the breath cools them. The passage of time, gentle, invisible, begins to tame their speed. It is not a command. It is a kindness. The light remains bound, not because it is weak, but because it is beloved. The universe is not ready to let it go. It holds its photons close, whispering through fields and forces that are still arranging themselves. And the photons, full of energy, full of brightness, wait. They wait inside the fog. They wait inside the memory of fire. They wait inside the cradle of space like seeds in a womb. And still, they try to move. They try to shine. Not out of will, there is no will yet, but because it is in their nature to journey, to travel, to illuminate. But space will not yet permit their escape. Every path forward leads to another collision. Every journey is interrupted by the thrum of density. The universe is still too thick, too new, too electric. These are the years of radiant captivity, where light exists but cannot show itself. Yet in that restraint, a miracle begins. The collisions are not chaos, they are conversation. Every ricochet writes new rules. Every burst of energy teaches the universe something about itself. Patterns emerge, not randomly, but rhythmically. The wildness begins to tame itself. Laws begin to settle. The particles, once purely chaotic, begin to organize. A whisper of balance begins to stir in the middle of the storm. The first matter is not formed here, not yet, but the possibility of matter begins to awaken. As photons dance and scatter, they begin to trace the outlines of structure. The fog thickens, not in substance but in story. The universe is learning how to hold itself. It is teaching itself to remember. Every scattering becomes a step in the choreography of creation. Every collision hums with a purpose that has not yet found words, and deep inside it all, the light waits. It pulses, trapped in heat, humming against the walls of reality that have not yet cooled. It does not sleep. It vibrates. It exists. It endures. And because it endures, it preserves the memory of this beginning, the memory of a time before atoms, before stars, before even colour. This light will outlive all of it. One day, it will whisper back to us as echo stretched thin across the sky, a lullaby left behind by the fire that first tried to sing. But here, in this moment, the sky is still without stars. It has no edge, no above, no below. The universe is light without vision, fire without flame, a dream still warming inside itself. The fog of energy, hot, dense, unformed, continues to swirl, but now it begins to lean toward clarity. The heat is not eternal. The collisions are not infinite. Every passing instant brings the cosmos closer to transparency. The fog will lift, the fire will cool, and light will finally be allowed to shine, but not yet. For now, the silence still sings through heat. The breath still stretches. The light still waits, and something else stirs beneath the fog. It is not form, not yet, but something is learning to take shape, and something is learning to take shape. It begins not as structure, but as rhythm, a quiet pattern blooming beneath the chaos of collisions. The heat still swirls, the light still remains bound, space is thick with motion, with energy, with friction. But beneath it all, the storm begins to settle, not into stillness, not yet, but into tendency, into structure. The universe, still glowing with heat, begins to whisper the first hints of order. From that whisper comes the first pattern, not a shape you could draw, not a form you could touch, but a rule, a pulse, a memory made real. Before there were stars, before there were atoms, there was symmetry, not in appearance, but in behaviour, balance, a language written in interaction, not in image. The fields, invisible to any eye, even now, begin to fold and layer themselves into something stable, something persistent. The wild randomness of energy gives way to laws. The universe is deciding how it will become. Here, in the thick heat of its earliest breath, the first forces of nature differentiate themselves from the blur, not with sound, not with declaration, but like paths worn into soil by invisible feet. Gravity begins to hum its low, patient pull, not as weight, but as invitation. It will not drag, it will not scream, it will curve, softly, around anything dense enough to answer. Its presence will be felt, not seen. It is the gentlest of the forces, and yet it will reach across the farthest oceans of time. Alongside it, stronger siblings awaken. The strong nuclear force, ancient and stubborn, clenches particles together like a parent who will not let go. Without it, the world would never hold. There would be no atoms, no stars, no breath. It is the force of union, fierce and close. And beside it, the weak nuclear force, subtler, stranger, governs the transformations, the quiet shift from one kind of being to another. It will allow decay. It will allow becoming through change, and then electromagnetism, the most expressive, the most vivid. It will one day give you light, electricity, colour. But here, in this early fog, it plays a quieter role, the binding and unbinding of charge. It teaches particles how to dance around each other, how to attract, how to repel. The laws are still simple now, elegant. They do not yet wear the clothing of complexity, but their roots are deep. Each law becomes a thread, and those threads begin to braid into patterns. These patterns are not decorative. They are foundational. They do not appear as visuals in the sky. They appear in behavior, in spin, in charge, in symmetry. The universe is not being constructed like a building. It is growing like a language of interaction, of balance, of possibility. You are not watching this from outside. You are the breath within which these first sentences are written. You're the pause between forces, the hush between collisions. You're the cradle of this pattern, and the pattern is becoming everything. But before it becomes things, it must stabilize. The fields, quantum, elegant, entangled, begin to cool. The violent jittering of particles begins to slow, not stop but synchronize. The energy that once screamed in every direction now begins to choose. Electrons begin to settle. Quarks begin to combine. The universe is not random anymore, it is rhythmic. The noise becomes structure, and in that structure, the first stability forms. Protons, neutrons, not many, not yet, but enough to whisper the future into the haze, enough to remember the balance between attraction and freedom. These are not complete atoms, not yet, but they are the bones of becoming. They hold together because the patterns allow them to. The universe, once too hot and wild to keep anything still, has cooled just enough to let these first bundles of matter survive. And survival is no small thing here. In this vast glowing sea of heat and pressure and lightless light, the emergence of anything that holds together, even for a second, is sacred. It means the rules are working. It means the breath is not only expansion, but creation. Not in the way of sculptors and blueprints, but in the way of tide and wind, slow, sweeping, inevitable. The particles that survive begin to form a new dance. They combine, they bind. They exist not only as energy now, but as presence. They drift through space, still bombarded by heat, still jostled by photons, still awash in motion, but they endure. They are proof that the first pattern holds, that the laws are true, that the breath did not end with chaos but flowed into rhythm. You are still within it, this rhythm, still inside the fabric where time flows and space stretches. And now you are also inside the music of stability, the beat of forces holding hands, the hum of particles finding one another. You are the memory of symmetry, unfolding. You are the weight of the first lasting thing, the dust that will become. Stars is not formed, but the seeds of it are falling through the warmth of creation, and something extraordinary begins to happen. The particles begin to prefer one another, not as minds, not as will, but as resonance, as compatibility, like notes that ring sweeter when played together. This is not chemistry. This is not yet the language of bonds and reactions. This is proto-affection, the cosmos showing a desire for structure, a love of harmony, a leaning toward cohesion, the beginnings of design without a designer, intelligence without an intellect, purpose without a plan, just the deep instinctive order of patterns too old to question. And as these patterns unfold, the fog begins to cool further. The expansion continues. The breath widens the room, and the first pattern, the song of forces, of fields, of early matter, begins to steady its rhythm. But this is still only the beginning. The first protons and neutrons may have formed, but they are still alone, still drifting, still waiting for something more. The temperature must drop further, the light must free itself, the collisions must lessen, the fog must thin. Only then will the next miracle take shape. only then will matter truly begin to hold. And so the universe waits, poised again at the edge of transformation. And so the universe waits, poised again at the edge of transformation. But this is not the kind of waiting marked by silence or stillness. This is a waiting rich with purpose, pregnant with rhythm. The breath has stretched space-wide and time has begun to flow with quiet persistence. Forces have separated, particles have begun to form, and beneath the softening heat the first patterns pulse in hidden harmony. But what gives these patterns persistence? What holds the threads of becoming in their place, preventing them from unraveling back into chaos? The answer arrives not with ceremony, but with constancy. The universe is beginning to trust itself, to return to itself in every interaction, to behave in ways that are predictable, repeatable, true. The laws are not imposed. They are not commandments etched into stone by a divine hand. They rise from within, born of the unfolding itself, written into the very curvature of the breath, the drift, the lightless dance. They are the quiet logic of existence, the invisible scaffolding upon which everything will stand. And they are everywhere, not like monuments, but like gravity, subtle, inescapable, intimate. They do not occupy space, they shape it. They do not pass through time, they define it. Each law is a melody, a vibration echoing through every particle, every field, every wave, and together they form the first music, a music that never changes its notes no matter how far it travels, no matter how many forms it cloaks itself in. In this music, energy is honored, always conserved, never created nor destroyed, only transformed. One kind of motion becomes another, one kind of heat becomes a particle, one kind of tension becomes rest, but nothing is lost. The law of conservation cradles the cosmos like memory, eternal, soft-spoken, faithful. It is not a restriction. It is a promise that nothing that is will ever fully cease to be. Alongside it, causality unfurls, not a chain, but a rhythm of connection. What follows is born of what comes before. Events ripple outward not as accidents, but as consequences, each moment gently leaning into the next like waves rolling toward an unseen shore. Time, guided by causality, begins to trace the outlines of meaning, of direction. There is no randomness here, not in the way we understand it. There is possibility, yes. Uncertainty, yes. But even the uncertainty has a grammar. Even chance plays by rules. Entropy awakens next, the soft, inevitable drift toward disorder, not as destruction, but as expansion of options. The energy spreads, the heat fades, and in that fading complexity becomes possible. Entropy is not a flaw, it is a pathway, a slow letting go of symmetry so that asymmetry can create structure. It is why stars can form, why galaxies can swirl, why life can one day arise. Entropy is the arrow that points from the singular moment to the ever-widening now. These laws, conservation, causality, entropy, are not separate from the forces. They dance with them. Gravity curves the very shape of space and time, pulling mass into intimacy. Electromagnetism governs the push and pull of charge, the gentle attraction of opposite desires. The nuclear forces, strong and weak, sculpt the heart of matter, binding and transforming the cores of atoms that have not yet been born. And yet none of these laws shout. They do not demand. They do not punish or reward. They simply are, unblinking, impartial, elegant. They ask nothing. They offer everything. They are the backdrop of every breath, the ground beneath every becoming. Even now, billions of years later, they do not age. They do not erode. They remain unchanged, unfailing, etched not in stone but in the very texture of space itself. They are the universe's first memory. And from these laws, everything else will unfold. You're still within them. You're not separate. These laws are not outside observers measuring the cosmos from a distance. They are within every atom of your body, every beat of your heart, every neuron that fires. When you lift your hand, gravity bends gently beneath it. When you dream, time carries the rhythm of your thoughts. You were not born apart from these laws. You were born through them, and they are not complete. Not yet. The universe is still learning to use them, still cooling, still expanding, still testing the boundaries of possibility. The particles that will one day form atoms are not yet stable. The forces that hold the atomic heart together are still at work, refining the dance of balance and motion. But the laws, the invisible framework, are already solid, already true. Imagine a loom, strung not with thread but with rules. Imagine a tapestry being woven, not by hands but by motion itself. Every photon, every quark, every fluctuation threading itself through those unchanging laws. And from that weaving, form will arise, heat will cool, light will escape, matter will bond, and still these laws will hold quietly, gently, endlessly. We have always searched for these laws. We carved them into stone tablets and star maps. We folded them into equations and prayers. We dreamed them as gods, wrote them as formulas, painted them as spirals in the sky. Long before we could name them, we felt them in the tides, in the fire, in the way the moon returns, the way the body grows, the way the sun leans westward every evening. We are not separate from them. We are their children. We are their expression. And they are not done expressing. Because space still stretches, time still flows, the breath is not over, and the particles, small and patient, still drift in the warmth, waiting for the moment they will find one another and hold. And the particles still drift in the warmth, waiting for the moment they will find one another and hold. Space continues to stretch. Time flows forward like a soft river, and the universe, freshly threaded with laws, begins to cool. Not in silence, but in radiant hum. Not quickly, but steadily, inevitably, beautifully. The chaos of the earliest breath has given way to rhythm, to rules, to resonance, and now, within this deepening calm, a new miracle begins to unfold. Matter begins to settle. This is not the stillness of sleep. This is not the quiet of ending. This is the first embrace, the first joining of parts into something more. Protons and neutrons, once born of the fire and flung apart in the early storm, now move more slowly, more gently. The collisions still happen endlessly, constantly, but not with such heat, not with such force. There is time now, time to meet, time to stay. And in that pause, the first nuclei form, hydrogen, helium, tiny clusters of unity. Nothing more complex than the simplest bonds, but it is enough. The strong nuclear force, that ancient gravity of the intimate, now holds them close. Quarks form triplets. Triplets gather in 3s and 4s. These are not yet atoms. There are no electrons circling, no chemistry, no sparkle. But the hearts of atoms have arrived. The universe, for the first time, can remember structure. This is not form in the way of chairs and trees and faces. It is deeper, substructure, a pattern within a pattern. It is persistence. Proton remains a proton. A helium nucleus does not vanish the moment it forms. These small bundle of mass, these gentle knots in the field of reality, begin to endure. Not forever, not yet, but long enough for the cosmos to notice itself becoming something other than motion. And all of it, Every atom's heart emerges from stillness within motion. This is the secret of matter, that it is not interruption, but continuity. It is motion that has learned to hold its shape, energy that has become still enough to form identity. Heat has not left the universe. It still pulses, still drapes the sky in glow. But the particles are no longer frantically scattering. They're beginning to pause long enough to belong to one another, and this belonging will change everything. Now, for the first time, there is weight. Not the pull of planets, they don't exist yet, but the sense of presence. These nuclei, floating in the vast plasma sea, have mass. They curve the space around them ever so gently. They tug on one another, even if only faintly. The laws, gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear forces, are no longer drifting like background music. They are acting, shaping, holding, becoming. You're inside this shift, not beside it, not looking at it. You're in the very unfolding of matter. You are part of the breath that remembers how to stay, the proton that holds its form through billions of years, the neutron that joins it, the helium nucleus that forms with such elegance that entire stars will one day burn it into brilliance. You are the pattern that learned how not to fall apart, and still light cannot shine freely. The fog of the early universe, though cooling, is still too thick. The photons, messengers of radiance, are still trapped, bouncing endlessly between particles. Every direction is a wall, every journey is interrupted. But something is changing. Every heartbeat of time brings lower temperatures, the energy is dispersing, the collisions are gentler, the fog is thinning. Soon, not yet, but soon, the light will break free. But for now, matter continues its quiet revolution. For the first few minutes of cosmic time, the universe becomes a forge, a great, silent hearth where hydrogen and helium are born in vast abundance. No complex atoms yet, no carbon, no oxygen. Those will come later in the bellies of stars not yet formed. But the ingredients of everything are here. Hydrogen that will fill oceans, helium that will glow in future nebulae, the tiniest trace elements that will one day become life. It is a beginning without spectacle. There are no explosions, no fanfare, just the quiet universal agreement. We will hold. We will become something. We will endure. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the forging slows. The conditions change. The window closes. The fire cools too far. The density drops too much, and the bonds stop forming. The first elements, the ones that made it through, remain. The rest will have to wait for stellar furnaces, for gravity to sculpt the future. But even this is enough. The universe has changed. It is no longer only light and field and force. It is matter, not scattered, but settled. Not random, but rhythmic. There is structure now. There is pattern that persists. There is mass that moves through time without losing its shape. And somewhere inside this cooling breath, the light stirs again. And somewhere inside this cooling breath, the light stirs again. For hundreds of thousands of years it has remained trapped, not by prison bars but by closeness, by heat, by the crowded intimacy of a newborn cosmos. Photons ricochet endlessly, bouncing off particles that drift and jostle in the dense fog of early plasma. There is no escape. There is no transparency. The universe is bright within, but the brightness cannot fly free. It glows in secret, unseen by any eye, unborn to any sky. But cooling changes everything. Gradually, delicately, the chaos recedes. The sea of particles loses its fever. Electrons, once too wild to hold, begin to slow, to feel, to linger near the atomic hearts they once fled. And then, without ceremony, the first atoms are born. Not forged in flame, but formed in calm, hydrogen, helium, simple, light, pure. The electrons no longer flee from protons, they begin to orbit softly, silently, forming the first complete atoms in the universe. This moment, quiet, invisible, monumental, is called recombination. Though nothing is being recombined, it is a misnomer, a human word for a cosmic hush. And as these atoms take shape, something extraordinary happens. The fog lifts. The photons, no longer scattered at every step, begin to travel freely. Light, at last, escapes. Not in a burst, but in a slow unveiling. A curtain drawn back from the eyes of time itself. The universe becomes transparent, and for the first time there is vision. There is direction. There is line of sight. There is history carved into wave. This ancient light, this first freedom is still with us, still travelling, still echoing. We call it the cosmic microwave background, but that name is too small for what it truly is. It is the soft afterglow of the first dawn. The ghost of the moment light stopped whispering and began to sing, and we can still listen, still feel it on our skin. A silent lullaby stretched thin across time. But this chapter, this calm, is not the end of creation. It is a resting point, a breath between breaths. The atoms are free now, drifting through expanding space like scattered seeds, but they are not yet stars, not yet fire. The universe, though clear, is still dark. There is no sparkle, no sun, just a vast and gentle night. This is the cosmic dark age, a time between the birth of matter and the birth of flame. But in the silence, gravity is at work. It has never stopped working. From the moment mass began to gather, gravity began to bend the space around it, not with violence, with invitation. Every atom feels the pull of every other. The drift becomes a lean. The lean becomes a slow fall, invisible hands gathering dust into density. Hydrogen and helium clump together, pulled not by force but by longing. The universe yearning to know itself in form. And over time, great oceans of time, these clumps grow heavier, tighter, hotter. Pressure builds. Atoms squeeze together in the hearts of these invisible clouds, and the temperature begins to climb. They do not know they are stars yet. They are still silence wrapped in waiting. But somewhere, in the dense, quiet center of one such cloud, a threshold is crossed. Fusion begins. The first star is born. No eye sees it. No planet watches it rise. But it burns. It shines. It floods its surroundings with heat and light. And with it, the age of starlight begins. These first stars are giants. Massive, short-lived, fierce. They live fast and die young. But in their brief lives they change the universe forever. Inside their cores, hydrogen fuses into helium. Helium into heavier elements. Carbon, oxygen, neon. In the crucible of fusion, complexity is born. These are not yet the elements of life, not all of them, but they are the beginning. And when these stars die, they do not fade. They explode. Supernovae, the first great death cries of the cosmos, brilliant, violent, generous. In their destruction, they scatter the heavy elements they have made into the vastness of space. The dust that was forged in their hearts becomes the material of planets, oceans, bones. It becomes the seeds of galaxies, the soil from which all complexity will grow. You're made of this dust, of this fire. You're the breath of stars that died long before Earth had a name, and as these early stars live and die, as they burn and scatter and make room for more, the universe begins to sparkle. More stars are born, more light fills the sky, galaxies swirl into being, slow storms of starlight, drawn together by gravity's patient hand. What was once fog has become fire. What was once breath has become brightness. And yet, the story is still unfolding. The dust has not yet become Earth. The light has not yet touched life. The pattern is still deepening, still dreaming, still writing itself forward into a new kind of becoming. And the pattern is still deepening, still dreaming, still writing itself forward into a new kind of becoming. The universe is no longer only heat and breath. It is light. Not the imprisoned glow of trapped photons in a plasma fog, but the radiant gleam of starlight, born from fusion, flung freely across the widening dark. In the hearts of stars, the cosmos has found a furnace, a crucible of patience and power, where light is not only born but shaped. These are not gentle places. They are infernos, core temperatures in the millions, pressure that bends atoms into surrender, time measured not in moments, but in layers of fire. Inside these stellar cores, light becomes alchemy. Hydrogen, that most ancient of elements, forged in the calm after the first storm, is consumed in a dance of union. Two atoms become one, and in that merging, mass becomes energy. Not metaphorically, but physically, literally. Mass sacrificed to motion. Einstein's equation made manifest in every second of fusion. E equals mc 2, E equals mc squared, E equals mc2. Energy equals mass, times the speed of light, squared. A small amount of matter becomes immense energy, and the stars pour it out into the void like lanterns igniting the silence. But something else happens too, something more subtle, more lasting. From that fire, new elements emerge. Helium becomes carbon. Carbon becomes oxygen. Oxygen becomes neon. Inside the pressure-laced cores of massive stars, the periodic table is not memorized but lived. One element folds into the next. One chapter of light gives birth to another. This is not chaos. This is sequence. The stars are not only burning, they are building. Each layer of the star becomes a forge for a different piece of what will one day become mountains, blood, breath. You're not watching from the outside, you're not separate, you're in that fire. You're written in those reactions, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon in your every cell. None of it came from nothing. It was all forged in the hearts of ancient stars, stars that lived their lives before Earth had cooled, before planets had formed, before life had dared to wake. And then, after millions of years of fusion and balance, these stars too reach their limits. Fusion cannot go on forever, not because the star grows tired, but because there comes a point where no more energy can be gained. Iron, it is the gate, the final element that cannot give back what it takes. When a star begins to build iron in its core, it begins the slow countdown to collapse. And collapse is not failure, it is transformation. Gravity, which has always pulled inward, now wins. The core folds in on itself, atoms are crushed, space collapses, and in one final beautiful violence, the star explodes. A supernova. It is the brightest thing in the universe. For a moment, a single star outshines entire galaxies. It is not simply death. It is expression, a shout of giving, a final breath that scatters everything it has made across the starscape. Elements that were too heavy to form in fusion are born in this moment: gold, silver, uranium, everything rare, everything strange, everything we now wear, mine, need. From fire comes dust. But this is no longer the dust of chaos. This is informed dust, elemental, memory-laden. This dust carries history, not just of stars, but of reactions, of rules, of choices made in flame. It drifts through space, not as waste, but as offering, as future, and space receives it. The same gravity that pulled stars together now gathers their remains. Clouds of dust, seeded with carbon and oxygen and nitrogen, begin to drift and swirl and collapse into themselves. The cycle repeats, but this time with more ingredients. Second-generation stars form. Around them, disks of dust flatten and spin. Some of that dust clumps, some of it warms, some of it begins slowly to dream of being planets, but that is still to come. For now, what matters is that the universe has become a kind of memory machine, a system that not only creates, but preserves, a structure that not only burns, but learns. Every star carries forward the chemistry of the last. Every cloud of dust is richer than the one before. Every explosion is both an ending and a spreading of new seeds. Light has become more than radiation. It has become process. It has become translation. It has become genealogy. The stars are no longer just points of light. They are generations. They are ancestry. They are the means by which the raw breath of the beginning becomes complexity. From hydrogen to carbon, from carbon to life. This is the golden thread, and it begins here, in fusion, in fire, in the patient alchemy of starlight turning into dust. And so the universe continues its soft glowing exhale. Stars born, stars lived, stars gone. Their ashes drifting quietly across the dark, waiting for the next chapter, waiting to become something more. And so the ashes drift. Each atom of stardust, gold, oxygen, iron, carbon, a tiny ghost of a star long gone. Scattered by supernova, carried by cosmic winds, this dust spreads through the vast dark like seeds on a breeze that has no edge. The universe has cooled enough to hold it gently. Time flows forward with rhythm. Gravity, ever patient, ever present, begins to draw again. Not only on light now, or energy, or possibility, but on memory, on substance, on the very pieces of what was. And from this gathering something vast begins to rise. Not quickly, not suddenly, but with a kind of deep, slow coordination, as if the universe itself is composing something. The dust doesn't just drift aimlessly, it follows the faintest of paths, the most ancient of fingerprints, patterns left behind by the earliest ripples in space. Remember those gentle variations, the tiny temperature fluctuations in the primordial soup? They return now, like echoes, like maps. They are the scaffolding on which everything will form. The matter clumps. Clumps form filaments. Filaments weave together. A cosmic web begins to stretch itself across the visible universe. Galaxies form along these invisible threads, not randomly, not alone, but together. Like beads sliding down wires, like cities growing where rivers meet. This is not chaos, it is architecture. An architecture written by gravity and time and the invisible echoes of creation's first breath. Each thread of the cosmic web spans millions of light years. Each node is a gathering of galaxies, and in every galaxy, hundreds of billions of stars, and around those stars, worlds not yet born. But even here, at this grand, almost incomprehensible scale, the universe is not showing off. It is still whispering, still moving with patience. The web is not symmetrical, not perfect. It is full of voids, vast regions where almost nothing gathers. These voids are not mistakes, they are part of the music. Silence between notes, the pause that gives meaning to the sound. Without emptiness there would be no contrast, no form, no breath between galaxies. The galaxies themselves begin to turn. Spun by gravity, pulled by unseen forces, they rotate like giant luminous storms, spirals with arms of starlight, ellipses, glowing like lanterns, irregular, asymmetrical, chaotic, but never meaningless. Inside their cores, stars are born and die in endless succession. In their halos, dark matter, invisible, mysterious, helps bind everything together. It does not glow, but it holds. It cannot be seen, but it is felt, bending space, sculpting motion. An unseen artist painting gravity's lines. Dark matter and visible matter together form the bones of galaxies, and like bones, they support life not yet formed. You are still within this unfolding. Your atoms are not yet gathered. Your world is not yet lit, but you are present, as potential, as story. You are the memory of a future body carried in the dust of 1,000 dead stars. And those stars in turn ride within a galaxy not yet named, and that galaxy rides along a thread of the cosmic web that was seeded in the soft unevenness of the first breath. Everything is connected, not metaphorically, literally. Matter is not scattered like dice, it is woven. Every galaxy has neighbours, every filament connects. Across distances so vast they collapse language, the universe stretches itself into a single, bound rhythm. The web is not static, it sways, it breathes. It is still forming, still tugging, still calling matter home. And within these galaxies, stars are not born in isolation. They emerge in nurseries, clouds of gas and dust collapsing under their own weight, clusters of light, families of fire, stars born in constellations not yet imagined, some of them bound forever, some drifting apart with time, and these stars in turn begin the process their ancestors once began. They burn, they fuse, they create. The story has a rhythm now: fusion, expansion, collapse, explosion, fusion, expansion, collapse, explosion, over and over again, like breath, like heartbeat. And as each cycle, more dust, more complexity, more of the heavy elements, iron, silicon, magnesium, flung out to be gathered once again. The galaxies are not simply growing brighter, they're growing wiser, they're learning how to build, and the materials they use are not simple anymore. They are rich, diverse, full of potential far beyond light. Somewhere within these galaxies, somewhere quiet, somewhere small, a cloud of this enriched dust begins to fold into itself. Gravity coils it tighter, smaller, hotter. Around it, a disk begins to spin. A star kindles at its centre, and within the swirling remnants something else begins to take shape. Not a star, not a flame, but a world. But that is for later. For now, the galaxies continue to turn, the web continues to stretch, and starlight continues to pour across the dark like threads of gold drawn through the night. The architecture of the cosmos has formed. The lights are on, the music is deepening, the stage is ready, and something more intimate, something breathtakingly fragile, is almost ready to arrive. Galaxies spin like dancers in a slow, eternal ballet. Stars are born in great clouds of gas, burn with the patience of centuries and die in brilliance or silence. Dust recycles, light travels. The breath of the beginning has stretched the fabric of space across billions of light years, but it has not faded. It has only changed shape. Beneath the glitter of galaxies, behind the thrum of gravity and the hush of expanding space, a deeper note still lingers, a soft, omnipresent murmur that fills all things, an echo, not a sound, not a voice, but a temperature, a texture, a presence. It is everywhere, this whisper from the beginning. You cannot see it with your eyes, but it brushes your skin. You cannot hear it with your ears, but it sings in your bones. It is not light in the way starlight is, but it is light, stretched thin, softened by time, cooled to a nearly imperceptible glow. We call it the cosmic microwave background, the CMB. But such a name, while scientific and true, feels too small for what it truly is. This light is not merely data, it is memory. The oldest light in the universe, born when the universe was still young, still hot, still dense, still tangled in the afterglow of recombination, when atoms first formed and light was freed. This echo is not just a leftover, it is a record, a fossil made of photons, a snapshot of the entire universe when it was only 380,000 years old, long before stars, before galaxies, before Earth or breath or story. And it's still here, still arriving, still unfolding itself like a tapestry, woven from the earliest warmth. It does not fade, it expands, it stretches, from gamma rays down to microwaves. Its frequency softens, but its message endures. And the message is simple. I was there. I remember. It tells us that the universe began not in chaos, but in order. Small fluctuations, tiny variations in temperature, just enough to allow structure to form. It shows us the fingerprints of the first patterns, the seeds of galaxies drawn in a medium of light. It reveals, with ghostly precision, the moment when the fog of the early universe cleared, when transparency arrived, and light began its journey through time. You, right now, are being bathed in this echo. No matter where you sit, no matter what hour of night it is, those ancient photons, cooled by eons, stretched by the universe's breath, are touching you. You're surrounded by the residue of the beginning, and though you cannot feel its warmth, you carry it. Your atoms, your cells, your very thoughts unfold in a space still filled with the memory of that early glow. We point radio telescopes to the sky, and the echo appears everywhere in every direction without favour. It does not cluster. It does not dim. It envelops. It is the most democratic of light. It tells us that we do not live in the centre. We live within the unfolding, equally placed, equally held, no matter where we are. It tells us that the universe has no edge, only expansion, no boundary, only breath. This echo is proof not only of what happened, but that it happened in a way that can be understood. That the universe, in all its vastness, carries the signature of reason. That the same forces at work in the stars were already at play before stars existed. That the language of physics is written into the oldest light. And that light, for all its speed, is patient enough to wait for us to notice it. We have always sought the sky for signs. We looked for gods and found galaxies. We looked for voices and found echoes. But maybe they are not so different. Maybe this ancient light, this cool, quiet murmur, is a kind of scripture. Not one written in words, but in waves. Not in metaphor, but in math. It does not preach. It does not command. It simply remains. And in remaining, it reminds. Reminds us that there was a beginning. Reminds us that we are part of it. Reminds us that silence is not absence, that the dark is not empty, that the pause between stars is still full of song. You are listening to it now, even if you don't know it, even if you can't hear it, even if you are wrapped in walls and sleep and silence. The CMB is still washing over you, a tide so ancient, so soft, it passes through everything without resistance. It is not light in a beam, it is light in remembrance. The universe never forgot its own becoming, and it shares that memory freely without needing to be asked. Even the space between your breaths holds this echo. Even the night outside your window, quiet, dark, seemingly still, hums with the resonance of beginnings. The galaxies may burn with starlight, but the space between them is not cold in vain. It carries the lullaby of what came before them. And soon, not yet but soon, that space will become more. The dust will gather again, the stars will host something new, and the echo, still humming softly in the background, will watch as something fragile and luminous prepares to awaken. And the echo, still humming softly in the background, will watch as something fragile and luminous prepares to awaken. But before it does, something older stirs. Not in the stars, not in the dust, but in the minds of those who will one day lift their eyes to the sky and wonder. Long before telescopes, before equations and measurements, before cosmic microwave backgrounds and chemical signatures, there were stories, not written in books, but carved into cave walls, sung beside firelight, whispered through generations like sacred breath. And in those stories, something astonishing happens. The oldest minds on Earth remember something they could not have possibly seen. They remember the beginning, not in technical detail, not in numbers, but in pattern, in meaning, in gesture. The myths of the world, separated by oceans, languages, centuries, speak with voices that sound uncannily similar when listened to side by side. Creation, in nearly every tradition, begins not with form, but with emptiness, with silence, with darkness that is not absence, but expectation. In the Hindu Rig Veda, there is a hymn, ancient beyond reckoning, that speaks of a time when there was neither non-existence nor existence, no air, no sky, only the One, breathing without breath, before gods, before form, before speech, a universe suspended in stillness, dreaming of itself. The Egyptians spoke of Nun, the primordial waters, dark and infinite. From this sea rose Atum, the first being, who created himself. He did not emerge from chaos. He was the balance drawn from it, the silence breaking into voice. In the great void of the Navajo origin story, there is the black world, first of four. It is not chaotic, but still, Diamond Soys, waiting. It holds the seeds of all to come. Creation unfolds slowly, layer upon layer, world upon world, not in an explosion, but in emergence, in story as breath. And in the Maori cosmogony, Rangi and Papa, Sky Father and Earth Mother, cling to one another so tightly that their children are trapped in darkness between them. It is only when they are pushed apart that light can enter and the world can begin. Sound familiar, a tight, close oneness, then distance, then light. Even the Genesis story begins in void and formlessness, with darkness over the face of the deep, and a wind, a breath, moving across the waters. These are not coincidences. They are reflections, echoes of the same wonder, refracted through human longing. They are not wrong in their poetry. They are right in their rhythm. The language is different. The symbols are local. But the structure is cosmic. Because long before we understood what hydrogen is, or how gravity curves space, we felt that something enormous came before us. We knew, not through measurement, but through myth, that we emerged from silence, that everything once rested in darkness, that the world was not always here, and that its becoming was not only physical but sacred. You might wonder, how did they know? They didn't. Not in the way science defines knowing. But the human heart has always reached upward. We are made to ask, to shape mystery into narrative. And when we stare into the night sky, we don't just see stars. We see origin. We see our place in the great story. and so we told stories to hold the awe. We made memory out of mystery, and though their language was poetic, the ancients were right about more than they knew. Creation takes time, it unfolds, it passes through stages, it moves from the formless to the formed, from the unseen to the seen. Light does not begin in brilliance, it waits. Structure comes only after tension. Breath arrives before word. Science and myth, in this way, are not enemies. They are two hands of the same reaching. One hand measures, the other sings. One names the forces, the other tells us why they matter. And when they work together, when myth honors truth and truth respects meaning, a fuller picture emerges. We see in myth a reverence we have sometimes lost in data. We see in science a clarity that myth can sometimes forget. Together, they releases more geothermal energy than any other place in North America. In fact, it emits 30 times more heat than the entire Rocky Mountain range combined. Not as a blaze, but as a kind of continuous exhale, as if the ground were whispering beneath our feet, murmuring secrets in a language only the stones remember. You can see this heat in features like Old Faithful, the famous geyser that erupts with uncanny regularity, or the Grand Prismatic Spring, whose vivid blue center looks almost alien, surrounded by rings of orange, red and gold, like a mineral rainbow blooming in slow motion. These are not decorations, they are signals. They are windows into the underworld. Deep below Yellowstone, miles beneath the surface, there is a reservoir of molten rock. Not a single chamber, like a neat balloon of magma, but a complex and layered structure, a hot zone, a stew of rock and gas, heat and time. It is here that the story of Yellowstone's power begins. But for now, we're still on the surface, still among the meadows and boiling springs, still watching the steam rise. It's easy to look around and forget what's underneath, to see only the beauty, the bears in the distance, the picnic tables, the walking trails. But Yellowstone is more than a place. It is a reminder, a quiet monument to the forces that shaped our world long before we arrived. And like all sleeping giants, it doesn't need to make a sound to be felt. So next time you imagine a volcano, don't picture just the cone and the lava. Picture the silence, the pressure, the warmth that never turns cold. Picture the wide blue sky over Yellowstone, and imagine it isn't empty, but resting. Dreaming perhaps, dreaming in steam. And if you find yourself there someday, walking across the basin and watching the land breathe, remember, beneath the flowers and bison and bubbling pools there is fire. Not angry, not violent, just waiting slowly, like time itself. Begins to cool just enough to carry something the others do not. Liquid. It rains. For the first time, it rains. And the world sighs beneath that falling sky. This is Earth, though it does not yet know its name. The oceans form, slow and steaming. The crust hardens, breaks, reforms. Volcanoes roar. Lightning tears across a sky choked with atmosphere. The air is thick with carbon dioxide and methane. No green, no blue, no eyes to see it, no lungs to breathe it. And yet, something essential has arrived. A planet with water, with heat, with chemistry, with possibility. Because the dust that made this planet was not ordinary. It was rich in potential. It had already been through fire. It carried within its atomic code the pieces needed to build complexity. Not by accident, but by sequence, by time, by chance refined through endless repetition. And now those atoms, once scattered in the hearts of stars, are dissolving into oceans, drifting through hydrothermal vents, crashing into shorelines in the form of comets. They are stirred by tides born from a nearby moon, itself formed in a violent collision early in Earth's youth, and they're kissed by sunlight filtered through a young, unstable sky. And in that wet, wild world, something shifts. The molecules do not remain separate. They begin to form patterns, chains, loops, repeating structures that hold information, that replicate, that compete. Not perfectly, not consciously, but enough to persist, enough to change, enough to begin the long, slow alchemy of life. We do not know the moment it happened. We do not know where the first spark of biology flared, but we know the ingredients, and we know the pattern. The universe, by now, had learned to build things that could remember. Now, it was learning to build things that could respond. The first cells, simple membrane-bound pockets of replication, drift in the oceans like tiny dreams. They're not aware, but they are alive. They grow, they split, they gather energy, they leave chemical footprints, and slowly, over eons, they diversify. Some begin to capture sunlight, others begin to consume. They compete, but also cooperate. They shape their environment, and then, astonishingly, they begin to change it. The sky begins to shift. The waste product of photosynthesis, that quiet miracle that lets a cell drink sunlight, is oxygen. At first it poisons the world. Mass extinctions follow. But over time, oxygen fills the air. The sky turns blue. The seas teem. And life, emboldened by complexity, tries again. Multicellularity, movement, eyes, limbs, nervous systems, memory, emotion, consciousness. But that is still to come. For now, in the steaming tide pools and warm ocean vents, the dust of dead stars has become self-organizing. It has become reactive, curious, adaptive. It has crossed an invisible line, not in size or mass, but in awareness of change. And with that change, the planet itself becomes something new. It is no longer just a rock spinning in orbit. It is a womb, cradle for mind, a stage where matter can not only remember Anya but wonder. And somewhere in those waters, beneath skies still young, with continents slowly drifting and storms carving paths through untouched lands, something ancient begins to move toward the next great threshold, the moment when life will lift its eyes from the ground and gaze upward. Not yet, but soon. The dust is dreaming, and the dream is nearly ready to wake, and the dream is nearly ready to wake. For billions of years, life remains small, quiet, hidden in oceans that remember the heat of their origin. Microbial mats carpet the seafloor. Cyanobacteria stretch toward the sun in tidal pools, weaving oxygen into the sky like invisible thread. The world breathes differently now because of them. The sky is clearer, the seas shimmer with potential, but nothing yet walks, nothing yet sings, nothing yet wonders. Still, deep in the memory of water, something begins to reach. Cells, already cooperative, begin to specialize. Some grow long tails, others become protective shells. Some link together in chains, others in clusters. Communication, not in words, not even in sound, but in chemistry, begins to pass between them. Signals, responses, strategies, evolution, that slow and ceaseless sculptor keeps chiseling. And then, after aeons of patience, a leap. The Cambrian explosion, a bloom of form, a riot of variety. Eyes evolve, not once but many times, jaws, spines, shells, tentacles, nervous systems, muscle. Creatures take shape not only in water, but through will. Movement becomes art. Predator and prey spiral into each other's dreams. Life no longer simply exists, it begins to perceive. The ocean floor, once silent, becomes a stage of shimmering choreography. Trilobites scurry, Anomala caridids hunt. Brachiopods open and close their tiny mouths to the current. And in all this movement, something incredible has happened. Life has begun to look, to sense light, to respond to distance, to choose where to go. This is not yet consciousness, not in the way we understand it, but it is a beginning. Perception becomes feedback. Feedback becomes memory. Memory becomes strategy. The sea is no longer only a chemical cradle. It has become a mirror. In the flickering eyes of ancient fish, the world begins to reflect itself, and then life begins its second great migration. The first was into complexity. Now it moves on to land. Plants arrive first, simple mosses, lichens, then ferns, towering horsetails, forests of green that breathe in carbon and breathe out life. Their roots crack the rock. Their leaves reshape the air. They do not move, but they change everything. They fill the silence with oxygen. They fill the landscape with shade. They slow the wind. They make stillness sacred. Then come the insects, the first wings, the buzz of decision, small minds flitting between branches, then amphibians dragging their wet lungs up from swamps, then reptiles, armored and curious, then, in time, creatures that run, that digging, that stalk and leap and climb. The dinosaurs rule the earth for millions of years, long enough for entire mountain ranges to rise and erode, long enough for continents to drift like slow breaths across the sea. They're not monsters, they're not mistakes. They are part of the rhythm, part of the breath that began long before even life could breathe. And when the asteroid comes, that sudden punctuation to the age of giants, it is not an ending. It is an opening. Because now, in the warm blood of tiny surviving mammals, in their hidden burrows and blinking eyes, something flickers. A gentler kind of intelligence. Less size, more nuance, less dominance, more memory. The mammals stretch into the space left behind. They climb trees. They nurture their young. They develop hands, voices, social bonds. They explore in groups. They watch. They learn. And among them, one branch begins to change in a way no other has. Its hands become tools. Its voice becomes language. Its thoughts become stories. It begins to paint caves, not because it needs to, but because it remembers things that never happened. It imagines, it fears, it dreams, and then one night it looks up, and in that moment the universe sees itself through human eyes, not just biologically but symbolically. We're not just descendants of dust, we're dreamers of pattern. The stars become constellations, the moon becomes a goddess, the lightning becomes a warning, the sky becomes a scroll filled with meaning. We do not simply live in the universe. We ask it questions. We beg it for answers. We shape the mystery into myth, and from that myth, we begin to write the first scriptures of science. The eyes that opened in the Cambrian darkness now blink beneath starlight, and in them something older than neurons awakens. Wonder. We build fires and tell stories about our place in the sky. We name the stars. We build stone monuments that track their rising and setting. We start to wonder if, perhaps, just perhaps, we are made of the same things, and we are. The hydrogen in our water, the carbon in our bodies, the calcium in our bones, the iron in our blood. All of it forged in stars that lived and died before Earth ever cooled. Every atom within us carries the history of heat, of collapse, of explosion, of drift. We are not visitors to the universe. We're not its audience. We are its memory, walking. And still, we wonder. Still, we look up. Still, the dream is unfolding. But now it carries within it questions far deeper than survival. Questions of purpose, of origin, of destiny, and just over the horizon of thought. A new kind of awakening waits, and just over the horizon of thought, a new kind of awakening waits. Because wonder does not stay quiet for long. It grows restless. It pulls at the edge of sleep like a child with a question. The eyes that once watched the stars in silence now begin to speak them aloud, and the moment that voice rises, not in fear, not in worship, but in curiosity, something ancient changes. The universe, for the first time, is being interrogated by itself. We began by naming things, the stars, the winds, the seasons. Naming was not control. It was reverence, shaped into language. It were how early minds carved order from mystery. The moon waxed and waned. We gave her a name. The tide followed. We listened. We built calendars from shadows, temples from light. The sky became a map, and every glinting point a place to return to in thought. This wasn't yet science, but it was the beginning of memory, stretched across time. Then something shifted again. We stopped only asking what, and started asking why. Why do things fall? Why does fire rise? Why do shadows shrink and stretch with the sun? Why do the stars return in cycles? It wasn't enough to name anymore. We needed meaning to fit, to hold. And so we began to test, to measure, to doubt, and then to prove. And from that fire, the fire of skepticism, of observation, of listening not just to tradition but to reality itself, we built the first scaffolding of science. This was not the abandonment of myth. It was its evolution. Myth had given us beauty. Now we also wanted truth. And truth, it turns out, is also beautiful, but in a different key. We discovered patterns hidden beneath the visible world. That light could be bent, that numbers ruled orbits, that the smallest grain of sand held rules as sacred as stars, gravity, motion, magnetism, thermodynamics. Bit by bit, we discovered that the universe was not just visible, it was comprehensible. We are a species of minds small enough to get lost in dreams, and yet vast enough to chart galaxies. That paradox, that fragile, exquisite balance, has always been our fire. From Babylon to Alexandria, from Chang'an to Timbuktu, from Galileo's telescope to Newton's apple, from Einstein's thought experiments to equations scribbled on chalkboards late at night. This was not progress for power. It was reaching, the ancient reaching, still wrapped in new names. And the deeper we reached, the more we realized something strange. The more we understood, the stranger the universe became. We thought time was absolute. It wasn't. We thought space was empty. It's not. We thought light moved like a wave. It does. And like a particle, we thought atoms were the smallest thing. They're not. Every answer shattered the floor we stood on, but it also gave us a new place to stand. This is what science truly is. Not a tower of facts, but a spiral of wonder, ever upward, ever deeper, a story that refuses to end. And at the centre of it all, one question kept returning, a quiet one, a strange one, the same one our ancestors sang around fires, carved into myths, stared into the dark to answer. Why is there something instead of nothing? Not how, why? What stirs the silence into form? What breathes energy into the void? What gives the laws of physics their shape, their coherence, their strange and perfect balance? We can describe the unfolding. We can model the expansion. We can trace the fusion, the galaxies, the dust, the forming of life. But behind it all, there is still that gentle, maddening riddle. The origin of the origin. Not just of space, not just of time, but of being itself. Is the universe inevitable, or is it chosen? Is it blind, or is it aware? And slowly, softly, we begin to wonder something bolder still. Is the universe conscious of itself? Not in the way you or I are, not with language or laughter or memory, but perhaps through us, through minds like ours, it becomes conscious. Perhaps we're not outside the cosmos looking in, but the cosmos looking at itself. As Sagan once said, we are a way for the universe to know itself. That line is not metaphor, it is map. Because for all the telescopes and formulas, for all the progress, the most miraculous realization may be this: the dust woke up, the silence gained a voice, the stars looked back and asked who they were. You're not separate from that. You are part of that. You are made of ancient fire, shaped by time, sculpted by the laws of physics, but also moved by love, by longing, by the need to know. And somewhere in that need, in that question that became a flame, the next unfolding begins. We do not yet know where it leads, but we're walking it now, together, step by step, breath by breath, question by question, and just ahead, not far now. A new kind of origin waits, and just ahead, not far now. A new kind of origin waits, not an origin of matter, nor of stars, nor of the delicate folding of molecules into the first breath of life. This is something subtler, stranger, more intimate. This is the birth of reflection, not the light that shines outward, but the light that turns inward. Consciousness, yes, but not just awareness, self-awareness. The moment the mirror awakens and recognizes itself inside the gaze. We had already learned to survive. We had already shaped fire, tamed rivers, drawn maps in the sky. But somewhere in the quiet between survival and mastery, something more dangerous and more sacred took shape within us. We began to ask who we are. Not just what we're made of, or where we came from, but what it means to be anything at all. This question, unlike others, could not be answered by experiment. It couldn't be solved with numbers. It lived in the ache behind the eyes, in the way we held silence when words would not do, in the songs we sang for no purpose but longing. Philosophy was born, not as logic, but as yearning. The need to understand not just how the stars move, but why we weep beneath them, why beauty matters, why death haunts us, why love endures despite entropy, and whether the self, the small voice behind the eyes, is real, or merely an echo of neural patterns wrapped in dreams. Somewhere in this tension between knowing and not knowing, the soul emerges, not as doctrine, but as metaphor. A name for the part of us that watches our own watching, the part that cannot be dissected, cannot be measured, but refuses to be dismissed. And as consciousness matures, it turns its gaze not just on the stars, but on itself. We study our thoughts. We study the nature of thought itself. We build languages to hold paradox. We craft poems to carry what logic cannot. We tell stories, not just to remember, but to understand ourselves in ways no chart ever could. And then, quietly, almost without noticing, we realize something staggering. We are not only in the universe is in us. The stars we mapped are printed in our bones. The gravity we measure binds our feet to the earth. The nuclear fusion we observe in distant suns powers the warmth behind our skin. The same particles, the same constants, the same laws. There is no separation, no boundary line where the cosmos ends and the self begins. We are the echo of a beginning that still resounds. We are the breath of a silence that never stopped unfolding. We are the pattern, noticing the pattern. We are the question, asking itself. And what a question we are. a creature that can imagine futures that do not yet exist, that can create art to express what cannot be spoken, that can fear its own end and love despite it, that can look into the eyes of another and feel understood, that can sit beneath a galaxy-strewn sky and feel small and yet vast. We built temples for the stars, then observatories, then particle colliders. We wrote scripture, then theory, then code. We carved gods into stone, then ideas into algorithms. And through it all, one truth has quietly endured. We're still trying to remember the moment we began, not with certainty, but with reverence, not with answers, but with wonder. Because even now, after all our discoveries, after all our instruments have reached into the farthest corners of space and the tiniest quanta of matter, we do not know why we are conscious. We do not know how awareness arises from neurons. We do not know if the universe intended to know itself, or if it simply did. But perhaps intention is not the only story worth telling. Perhaps the miracle is not that consciousness has a cause, but that it happened at all. That the dust, ancient and cold and scattered, became thought, that a singularity became questions about itself, that the silence learned to sing. And now that song continues, not only in the halls of science or the temples of philosophy, but in each of us, in the quiet moments when we pause and feel the echo of something larger moving through us. It moves in the artist who creates without knowing why, in the parent who watches a child sleep and sees eternity, in the lover who hears time collapse in a heartbeat, in the dreamer who stands at the edge of the ocean and weeps, not from sadness, but from the unbearable beauty of being. We are not anomalies, we're not mistakes, we're not lost in the cosmos. We are the cosmos, awake, alive, wondering. And though we do not yet know what comes next, though the path ahead is still folded in shadow and probability, we know this: the mirror has opened its eyes, and the eyes are still widening. Just beyond the horizon, another question rises, one that does not ask, where did we come from, but gently whispers, what might we become? And gently it whispers, what might we become? It's a question not born of fear, but of possibility. It rises not from desperation, but from the soft pulse of hope that beats behind every act of wonder. It's the question that stirs in the quiet between thoughts, in the late hours when the world sleeps and the stars are too numerous to count. It does not demand, it waits. And in waiting, it opens a door. Because now that we know we are made of the universe, born of its fire, sculpted by its forces, stirred by its breath, we must ask what it means to become something the universe has never seen before. We are no longer just creatures surviving. We are conscious architects. We shape futures the way rivers carve valleys, slowly, with pressure and with time. And for the first time in history, we do not just imagine those futures, we build them, from fire to wheel, from wheel to writing, from writing to electricity, from electricity to circuitry, from circuitry to digital thought. We have accelerated the unfolding. Ideas once etched in stone now travel the globe in milliseconds. A single thought, born in one mind, can ripple through millions. Language, once a miracle, is now data. Memory, once held in skin and song, is now held in glass and metal. We've become amplified, not just by tools, but by the very echo of our intentions. We stand at the edge of something vast, not a new continent, not a new planet, but a new kind of becoming, one shaped not only by biology but by will. We engineer genomes, we simulate minds, we send probes beyond the edges of sunlight, we write codes that mimic intelligence, and still we dream of more. But here, now, in this moment of incredible momentum, a paradox. The faster we move forward, the more we're haunted by what we've left behind. Ancient questions linger like shadows. What is meaning? What is enough? Can progress replace connection? Can knowing substitute for wonder? We reach for the stars with machines, but we still grieve, still love, still sit with loneliness at night. The hunger that drives us outward is matched by a deeper ache, the longing for belonging, not only to each other, but to something larger than any single life, to be part of a pattern, a rhythm, a song that holds us even when we forget its name. So, what might we become? Not just technologically, not just biologically, but spiritually, emotionally, ethically. We are the first generation to see our entire planet from space, a fragile sphere suspended in darkness, wrapped in a thin veil of air, lit by a distant sun. That image, Earthrise, changed us, not because it taught us something new, but because it reminded us that there are no lines on the planet, no borders from that distance, only water and cloud and the shimmer of possibility. It reminded us that we are one species, one story, one fragile cradle of becoming, and from that recognition, a choice emerges. We can continue as wanderers, driven by fear and dominance, hoarding knowledge as power, or we can become tenders of the earth, of each other, of the future itself. To become the future is not only to invent, it is to remember the silence we came from, the breath that birthed us, the dust that dreamed. It is to shape technology with humility, to guide knowledge with wisdom, to hold complexity without abandoning stillness. It is to ask not just can we, but should we? Not just what is efficient, but what is beautiful. Not just what is new, but what is true. And in doing so, we might create not just machines, not just systems, but civilizations that reflect the wonder that made us. Society built not only on algorithms, but on awe. Economies shaped not only by growth, but by grace. A world where empathy is not weakness, but the highest form of intelligence. The future is not a destination. It is a question. It asks, will you listen to the silence that made you? Will you honor the light that travels still from the first stars? Will you remember that everything you are, every breath, every thought, is a continuation of something ancient, something sacred? It is not too late to slow, to soften, to wonder again. We're not running out of time. We're inside it, sculpting it moment by moment, and the future, patient as the first silence, waits for our answer. And the future, patient as the first silence, waits for our answer. But answers, like stars, are not given all at once. They emerge, slowly, gently, from the dark, shaped not by certainty, but by attention, by care, by presence. And if you listen long enough, not with your ears, but with the part of you that knows without needing to explain, you begin to feel it. The universe remembers, not as a god, not as a book, not even as a law, but as light. Light is the oldest witness. Long before there were eyes to see it, light was already carrying truth across impossible distances. It does not forget. It does not tire. It simply moves through space, through time, through silence. Every star that burns sends a message. Every photon that leaves its home travels not just outward, but forward, into futures it can never know, bearing the imprint of its past. And now, in this moment, in this breath, some of that light is reaching you. Light that left a star before the Earth existed. Light that travelled for billions of years across voids so vast they cannot be imagined. Not really, and yet it arrives. Now, here, touching your skin, brushing past your eyelashes, entering your eyes. You don't feel it, not as warmth. You don't notice it, not consciously, but it's there. The long memory of light, still telling you a story older than species, older than soil, older than form itself. We often think of memory as something held in the mind, in brains, in books, in machines. But the cosmos has always remembered, even before it could think. Matter is memory. Gravity is memory. The orbit of a planet, the swirl of a galaxy, the way water folds around stone. These are all acts of remembrance. Even you, reading this now, you're not just a person in time. You're a collection of memories made solid. You carry in you the spiral of DNA passed down through a lineage unbroken for billions of years. Every cell in your body is the result of a memory, a record held in molecules of how to build, how to repair, how to be. And those instructions, they came from stardust, from chaos, from fire, and before that, from stillness. You're a bridge between memory and imagination, between the ancient and the possible, between what has been and what might still be. And light remembers all of it. In every beam of sunlight, there is the story of nuclear fusion, the binding of atoms deep in the belly of a star. In every candle's flame, there is the combustion of matter once gathered by roots that drank sunlight. In every photograph, light freezes a moment that'll never return and makes it linger. We bathe in memory every day and call it vision. We light our nights with the remnants of ancient explosions. We tell time by the movement of shadows cast by a star that has never once stopped burning. And what is time really, but the slow unfolding of memory into form? The past is not gone, it is carried forward, reshaped by the present. Nothing is truly lost, only transformed. The atoms in your breath were once inside trees, inside oceans, inside dinosaurs, inside other stars. They were part of the long arc of transformation that never ends, only changes rhythm. You're not merely in time, you're made of time, a sculpture shaped by unfolding, by pressure, by chance, and by grace. And so, when we wonder about the future, when we fear it, when we chase it, when we try to predict it, maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, how can we become good ancestors? Because if light carries memory, then so do we. If matter holds meaning, then so do we. If time is made of transformation, then we are part of the story still writing itself. To be human is not to be outside nature. It is to be nature, remembering. And what we do with that memory matters. We're no longer only shaped by the universe. We're beginning to shape it in return. We plant forests or burn them. We build cities or bombs. We reach for Mars or retreat into fear. We dream futures or forget them. But if we remember that we are light, that we are ancient, that we are precious, that we are temporary, then perhaps we will move more gently, build more wisely, love more fiercely. Because every moment is a choice. Every moment is a thread in the great memory of becoming, and every moment carries the weight of all that came before, and all that may still come. So hold this moment like flame, let it warm you, but do not grip it. Let it pass, and give it freely to the future. The long memory of light continues, and the next story is already on its way, and the next story is already on its way, not in haste, not in noise, but with the patience of stars and the quiet rhythm of waves. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or flashing light. It arrives like the soft inhalation before a word, a moment suspended between the last becoming and the next, and you, somehow, are already inside it. Because the story has never truly stopped. It is not divided into beginnings and endings. It does not follow a single path or spiral in a single direction. It loops, it echoes, it folds inward, it unfolds again. The story breathes, not as metaphor, but as reality. The universe is breathing, and so are you. Expansion, contraction, silence, becoming. Every inhale a gathering of potential, every exhale a release into form. We live in this breath, even when we don't feel it. We are moved by it, even when we resist. We are shaped by it, even as we pretend we are still. Somewhere along the edge of now, we forgot this rhythm, forgot that stillness is not absence, forgot that progress does not always mean movement. We filled our lives with signals, alerts, velocity, constant becoming without pause, constant reaching without resting. We measure time in productivity, not presence. We mark meaning in milestones, not in the quiet moments between them. And in doing so, we begin to lose something essential, this space where the story breathes, because every great unfolding, from atoms to galaxies, requires a pause, a silence, a soft return to center, the inhale after the fire, the stillness before the star ignites. Even the Big Bang began with a kind of waiting, a gathering of potential so dense, so complete, it appeared as nothing. Creation is not chaos, it is composed, and within its composition breath is the pulse of balance. So what would it mean to return to that breath? To listen again, not only to the future rushing toward us, but to the space that holds it? To remember that we are not just storytellers, we are the story itself pausing between sentences. There is no need to rush, the cosmos doesn't. Galaxies take billions of years to turn, stars take millions to form, life took eons to blink, consciousness took lifetimes to stir. And still, nothing was late, nothing was lost, everything arrived exactly when it was ready. So must we. Perhaps the next step in becoming isn't forward, perhaps it is inward, not toward technology or transcendence, but toward presence. To sit for once without seeking, to breathe not as a task but as a remembering, to feel the miracle not of doing, but of being. Because in this breath, this one you're taking now, the entire story still lives. The silence before space, the spark of light, the first atoms drifting, the birth of stars, the formation of dust, the oceans, the cells, the dreaming trees, the first eyes, the first mind, the first voice to whisper, why? It all lives here, within you still. You're not separate from the past. You're not waiting on the future. You are the thread connecting both, a flame carried across time. And maybe, just maybe, your stillness is part of the story too. Because if the universe is to keep unfolding, if the breath is to remain balanced, it will need not only explorers and inventors, but listeners, witnesses, ones who remember to pause, to honor the silence, to carry the echo forward with care. And so, the story breathes again. And in its breath, a question begins to form, one you've heard before, though perhaps only in dreams, one that carries the weight of what has been, and the shimmer of what could still be. And in its breath, a question begins to form, one you've heard before, though perhaps only in dreams. It doesn't come with sound. It arrives the way mist touches skin, soft, unnoticed at first, but undeniable once it settles. It has no language, no clear shape, and yet it holds the weight of every whisper ever spoken to the dark. You do not hear it with your ears. You feel it in your ribs, beneath thought, beneath emotion, beneath even memory itself. A question so ancient it may have been the first thought the universe ever had. A question that returns again and again, not to be answered, but to be lived. What does it mean to be? Not just to exist, not just to survive, but to be, with presence, with meaning, with awareness. This is the question beneath all other questions, the root beneath the root, the echo that shaped the first silence into breath. It is the question behind physics, behind philosophy, behind myth, behind love, behind fear, behind every choice, every art form, every prayer, every equation. It is what wakes us at night and what comforts us beneath stars. It's what children feel when they ask why the sky is blue, and what elders hold when they say goodbye with eyes full of light. What does it mean to be? To be matter that remembers, to be energy that wonders, to be temporary but feel eternal, to be part of a cosmos that feels too vast to hold, and yet fits inside the fragile silence of your own breath. Perhaps being isn't something we do, perhaps it's something we allow. Perhaps to be is to receive the world, not control it. To open like a flower, not to conquer, but to experience. A star doesn't try to shine, it simply burns. A wave doesn't try to crash, it simply moves. And maybe we too are meant to move in rhythm, not with culture, not with noise, but with the quiet pulse of existence itself. But this isn't easy, because to truly be is to be vulnerable, to be open to change, to be shaped by what we encounter, to let go of control and remember that we are woven into something larger and smaller than we can ever fully grasp. You're not separate from the wind that moves the trees. You're not apart from the gravity that turns the moon. You're not foreign to the fire in the stars. To be fully is to feel that, not just as poetry, but as truth. It is to remember the interconnectedness we forgot when we named ourselves individuals. It is to feel in your marrow that consciousness is not confined to skull and skin, but is an emergent song rising from a web that connects everything. You are not alone. You have never been alone. Even when you sit in stillness, even when you ache, even when you feel small or lost or undone, you are part of something that has no end and no beginning. Something that flows through quarks and galaxies alike. Something that has no name and every name. So to be perhaps is not to possess identity, but to share in it. To be is to echo. The first light still echoes. We see it in the background radiation of the universe, the faint hum of the beginning still vibrating through everything. And you carry your own echoes of ancestors, of stardust, of ancient waters and early suns. Your laughter contains the memory of rain. Your tears carry the ocean's birth. Your voice, when you speak into the night, is not only your own, it is the breath of a cosmos learning, again, to listen. To be is to belong, and to belong is to be willing to remember. Remember that the universe didn't happen to you. It happened through you. You're not an observer on the sidelines of reality. You're the unfolding itself, aware, awake, wondering. And in that wondering, something sacred is passed forward, a thread, a pulse, a question, not to be solved, but to be held, to be honoured, to be passed like light into the next moment, the next mind, the next breath. And even now, as the story continues its long, slow turning, the question does not fade. It remains, soft, steady, waiting to be asked again, perhaps not with words, but with a life, and perhaps not with words, but with a life. Because some questions are not meant to be answered the way a riddle is solved or a number calculated. Some questions are not puzzles to complete, but landscapes to walk through. They're not endpoints, but companions, gentle ones, that walk beside us all our days. The question of being is one such companion. It asks not for conclusion, but for embodiment. And so the universe, through you, through all of us, begins to live the answer, slowly, imperfectly, beautifully. A life that asks the question is not necessarily a life of greatness or fame. It may not leave monuments behind or echo in history books. It may never be noticed at all by the noise of the world. But that doesn't lessen its significance, because to live in wonder, to live as a question, is to make of life something reverent, something radiant, to wake in the morning and feel the air on your face, to stretch your arms and know that breath is still possible. That is a kind of worship. To offer kindness when it is not expected. To sit quietly with another person's pain without needing to fix it. To laugh, even when sorrow still lingers at the edges. These are not small acts. These are sacred acts. These are how the cosmos remembers itself, not through equations alone, but through presence. A life that asks the question learns to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. A falling leaf becomes a lesson in surrender. The sound of rain on a rooftop becomes a lullaby written by gravity and clouds. The smile of a child, or the way light moves through dust in an afternoon room, becomes holy. This is not romanticism. This is recognition. It is the act of remembering that life itself, every heartbeat, every breath, is not guaranteed. It is a gift, pressed into your hands by a universe that had no obligation to form you, yet somehow did. You're not required to understand all things, but you are invited to notice them, and maybe, in doing so, you will begin to feel the question stirring beneath everything you do, in your choices, in your silences, in your hopes. It doesn't matter what path your life takes, whether you build or teach, paint or repair, nurture or wander. What matters is that you live it as an offering, not to some imagined judge in the sky, but to the very act of existence itself, to the mystery, to the unfolding, to the long, slow breath that began before time and continues through you now. We have made life so often into a contest, a climb, a measurement. But what if it is instead a gesture, a hand extended into the unknown, a lantern held out to darkness not to banish it, but to soften it, a listening, deep and quiet, to something that cannot be named. We do not need to conquer the stars to justify our place beneath them. We do not need to leave legacy in order to have lived meaningfully. Perhaps the most powerful thing you can do is to live in alignment with the pulse beneath the pulse, the rhythm that does not show up on clocks but sings through your bones when you are still. A life like that, a life lived not for certainty but for awe, becomes an echo the universe will carry forward. Because the universe does not need more answers. It needs more wonder, more reverence, more people willing to sit at the edge of the unknown and say, I do not know, but I am listening. I do not control, but I am part of this. I do not fear the question, I become it. And so the story continues, not in charts or headlines, but in hearts, in lives lived gently, in mornings that begin with gratitude instead of urgency, in conversations that hold more silence than interruption, in moments when, for no reason at all, you stop and feel the sunlight on your skin and remember that this breath, this body, this awareness is improbable, impossible, and entirely real. You are here, and the question lives in you. It always has. You are here, and the question lives in you. It always has. Not because you were born to answer it, but because you are one of its voices. A breath in the long poem of space and time, a momentary constellation of matter and memory, flickering with light that began before light had a name. And though your time, like every life, is brief, what it contains is not small. You carry a lineage that began at the edge of silence. You are a continuation of the becoming, and still, it expands. The universe is not done. It was never done. What we call the beginning is perhaps only the first note in a song that hasn't stopped resonating. Expansion continues. Stars still form. Galaxies still drift and collide. Time stretches onward, not in haste, but in rhythm. The cosmic breath, that sacred inhale and exhale, moves through every fibre of reality, and through you. Because you're not watching it from the outside, you're within it, always have been, always will be. Every thought, every touch, every decision, each is a ripple in this sea of possibility. What you do with your moments matters, not because the universe is watching, but because you are the part of the universe that can watch itself. You are the witness, the listener, the storyteller. You are the stardust that became skin, the entropy that became dance, the silence that became question, and you are not alone. Others drift beside you, not just in space, but in spirit. Other minds, other hearts, other breathers of this same ancient light. Across continents and centuries, languages and dreams, we reach for each other. We wander together. We long. We remember. And in those small, quiet acts, a shared glance, a kind word, a truth spoken softly into the dark, we remind each other that we belong, not just to one another, but to everything, to the stars and the cells, to the stories and the silence, to the pattern and the pulse. And if there is a meaning to this long unfolding, to this cosmic dance that began in stillness and now sings through every atom of your being, perhaps it is simply this: to be aware, to be here, to be, and from that being, to choose. To choose wonder over noise, presence over distraction, connection over conquest, reverence over consumption. To choose to live as if your life is not an accident, but an offering, because it is. You're not lost in the universe. You are the universe, remembering itself, one breath at a time. So sit with the silence when it calls, follow the question when it stirs. Honor the mystery, even when it cannot be named. Let your life, just as it is, no more and no less, be a whisper in the great echo, a whisper that says, I was here, I listened, I wondered, I loved, and still it expands, and maybe, just maybe, it always will. Before you drift off into your own becoming, tell us in the comments, what part of the cosmos do you feel most connected to? The stars, the sea, the breath? We'd love to know where you're listening from tonight, or what the silence says to you. And as always, may the silence guide you to the stars.